Okay. Okay, and I need it. I have like on the, what do you call it? On the, in Discord, we've got the text chat on Discord and then the voice chat. And the text chat is like been largely invisible to me. But I think I have a solution now to have voice chat, then also with the new overlay. And you can confirm for me if it's working or not, guys. Wait a minute. Is my thing not working correctly? I'm looking at my stream source on I'm looking at my my scene on did I fuck up my scene on OBS? Because I've got the display capture here is working correctly. I guess oh yeah. I've got the overlay, and then video device capture is not showing. Probably because it's being taken over by Discord? Oh, yeah, my webcam's not showing on here right now. I don't know why. Why's my webcam not showing? What's going on? I'm gonna try to solve this really quick. Or maybe I should stop stream and start it back up again, just like do a fresh restart, because like I'm trying to figure out what's taking over my webcam.
Yo, okay. How are
wait.
yours? How
There,
are
I got
arranged?
it. I got it. It is just like a turn it off and turn it back on again thing. Okay.
Oh, okay. As far as the overlay, I'm not sure what settings you selected.
I am going to pull those settings back up again. We're going to do this here at the beginning of the stream before too much else happens. So because like the idea
Discord overlay, but it is not of the voice chat.
Yeah, so I'm going to go to that DM from you and go back to the link with the overlay and get this set up. Okay, install for OBS. Voice widget, show speaking users only. Okay.
Oh, no, don't show speaking users only. I mean, I guess you could. Yeah, I guess you could.
Is it working now?
You could stick with that. Let me see. No, it still looks like it's just showing the Discord link.
Okay. So I've got the let's see. I don't have the.
So if I go to that website again, let me check. So StreamKit overlay, all for OBS. Okay. So what
there's a chat thing here. I don't want the chat. I don't want the chat widget. I want the
voice widget is what you
want. You know what? I did the status widget. That's the reason why it's all fucked up. Okay. There are 3 different widgets.
Yeah.
Okay, so Discord overlay.
That's what I forgot in the instructions is the voice widget.
It's not on you, man. There we go. Okay, now people can see who the fuck is talking in this room on Twitch. So you guys are now, your usernames are up on Twitch and people can see who's speaking.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Which is exactly what I've been looking for. It's exactly what I needed. Yay. So you got, but I wonder if I can actually even see better on here than on my own thing. Oh no, it still shows the fucking ellipses. You can see how many of you, your username is fully not displayed for no particular reason. Is there a way to fix that on Discord, do you think?
That might be...
I think that's on the user end. I think when Discord rolled out a username change, I think maybe some people just didn't do it. I'm not sure.
Do you think the ellipses is just like them not doing the user?
So it could be because you're on streamer mode. That is one thing. And then also... There might be...
Yeah. When I disable streamer mode, it stops doing that.
Oh, it's fine now?
Yeah, I don't know why. Why does streamer mode want that?
Yeah, streamer mode does that because sometimes you don't want people, like, certain information from Discord to get shown out to the stream.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why.
I'm turning streamer mode off until I have a reason to turn it back on. I'm not sure why I would want it. Okay, now I can actually see
usually
who's
with, like,
fucking talking.
DMs
oh my god.
And TOS stuff. But I don't think that's going to happen for us.
Oh, thanks, that Victor. Yeah, I'm actually not going to work on this. I'm almost done with this painting. I was working on it this morning. I got some good progress on it. it's like a lot of little noodly things that are like too fiddly for me to do on stream. Like figuring out how the poses on these hands are supposed to go is a real bear, and then doing some final cleanup on like some of the sketchier background elements, and then I'm done. I'm really close. But yeah, I'm going to be doing a study as usual. I'm going to get it formatted, then I'm going to dump it out to Discord chat. I am thinking, here, let me know what you guys think. I'm thinking of setting up like a calendar, basically, where every day there'll be 3 tracks. You either get to pick landscape or figure photography or a master study. So we'll have like a classical painting. And each day we'll just populate a whole calendar full of stuff that we download off the internet, right? And so any day that you want to do one of those 3 major tracks, you just go to the Discord, you pull the image for that day. That's the one everyone's doing the study of that day. And that way you don't need to think. You just show up and we just spoon feed you the stuff. Like, it's been cool, really cool to see everyone follow and do the same study material as me. But I think that people want different study tracks, and I want to be able to provide some level of choice.
Dude, yes, please. I frequently waste like 30 minutes trying to pick an image to study from.
I want to make it easy, but I also don't want to like railroad people. So I'm thinking those are the 3 tracks I'm going to make, and so it'll just be like there'll be a channel on Discord or something. I'll figure out a way of like making it like a resource page on the website. And we just say like this is the resource, this is the study material for today, and we just bank it. We just bank like 50 of them in a row, and then that's the thing. And so we all go together to like pick which of the 3 or 4, whatever it is we want to do, and it's just like there for you. So if you just want to do figure stuff, you only have the thing. You just go there, you grab the image, you do the thing, you post it on the dailies, and it's done. And like, because right now it's like me, going into my folder and picking stuff out. But I've got a few different types of things, and like, it's sort of lacking consistency. And then I'm formatting it out and sharing it in a chat. You need to show up to chat to do it. I'm going to make it easy on everyone. Where do you think we should put those materials? I mean, maybe is there a format that makes sense on Discord? Should we do it on the website? We've got a website now. The website technically is up and works, actually. Huckleberry.art is a website that people can go to that we own. Check it out.
Maybe just like link to it on the Discord?
Yeah, I mean, we could link to it, but like it's like I don't want to have to post every morning on Discord to like say like here's today's study material. I mean, I guess I can. It's a little bit of a pain. I'd like to be able to just bank a big
Just, like pin a list to a website that has like galleries of like the stuff that you're like adding to it.
Yeah, so it's like it could, but also like I'm conscious of the fact that we're going to be driving people to one location or another. I love having people here on the community on the Discord. So maybe we put it on the Discord to incentivize new members to come join the Discord. Or do we want to like use it as a reason for people to use the website? Like, any thoughts?
I think the website one might be a reason. Give them a reason to get there, so it's just not a waste.
And then
I can't. Sorry.
what can you not do?
I can't think of like a non-inconvenient way of like, having images like on Discord.
Yeah. Because it's like what you'd want to do is there'd be like you go to a Discord channel and there's one post and it's just like here's the 3 pictures. But then we'd either need to set up a bot to like say like draw from. Well, I mean theoretically someone could program a bot to do this. It's like doable by a Discord bot, but like none of us are developers who can do that. So I kind of don't want to fuck with it that hard. I kind of just we'll just manually do it. And so I just need to plan out like here's a big pile of images that correlate to different days arbitrarily. And then every day as part of my morning routine, I like upload that day's study material. Alan X was asking, what kind of tablet am I using? I'm using a Wacom Intuos Pro. I think it's a Wacom Intuos 5, but they call them the Pro series now. And yeah, you can go to huckleberry.art, and we've got the digital resources tab over here where we're gonna like list stuff off. And so here's the current equivalent of the one I'm using. I'm also thinking about doing. So we're talking about right now. We have Fridays. There's this event on the Discord that says I'm doing portfolio reviews, but really, what I'm considering doing is having Friday be Community Day. And Community Day involves looking at all of the stuff that's on the Discord that people are posting. Like if people want, maybe we allow people to make sketchbook threads, like back in the day on concept art.
Fuck yes.
Conceptart.org. People used to do this thing where they make a thread and then they would always post their latest thing, and so people can make their own custom thread they can post into. And so we have a channel that's like people's like sketchbook thread, and then I think you can thread stuff in Discord, and that way like you would see all the current posts in like a big glob, but if you like dug into it, you could see that one user's like history of all their sketchbook posts.
Dude, Alejandro, he's gonna be like the golden boy of like this Discord, the guy who was like just starting when he joined and like went on.
He's gonna be the Dave Raposa of.
Yeah. I think what's her name? Ace might be too.
Yeah, but like. Yeah, I would love. Okay, so I'm gonna write that down. I'm gonna write that down as a thing because Dustin and I have a meeting on Mondays, and I have these things. Talking points for weekly meeting. Let's see. We're talking about weekly challenges, but it's like the one of the questions was like, what kinds of activities do we do on Discord? And one of them might be sketchbook thread, so that people can come and show off what they're doing and like create like a history of their progress, which I would love. And then on Fridays, Community Days, we go and dig in there and see somebody's got a thread on there, and then anyone watches the stream and they want to be a part of it too, they come to the Discord, they do the same thing, right? The other thing is like we can, on Community Days, I also want to dig in on stuff like resources to see like what cool resources have people posted, what are my thoughts on them, what do I think is really cool. And also like on the memes section, just like I want to look over what the community's been posting on Fridays to highlight the stuff that's cool that's happening here on the server. And then I also want to do giveaways every Friday. And so I am trying to reach out to Wacom to see if they want to send me a pile of tablets to give away to people. And I'm also, if they don't do it, I just bought someone I'm going to be doing a collaboration stream with, an XP pen, like equivalent to this, the $50 equivalent to this. This is $250, but like the XP pen version is only $50. So I'm thinking I might just buy like a stack of those and just every Friday give one out to somebody in like a drawing as a community event as part of like Community Day. So Community Day would be like, hey, let's look at some portfolios of some people who want feedback. Let's look at people who are doing really cool stuff in terms of their regular progress. Let's see what things are funny. Let's see what things are interesting. Let's give away some shit, right? So like that's sort of my vision for Community Day. It's like kind of it'd be a big day. Right now it's scheduled Fridays. It might end up getting moved to Tuesdays for my own personal scheduling reasons, but that's my vision for it. Because I want to like reward people for participating in this thing by like being seen and by the community at large. And so I really want to make a big spotlight day to like sort of celebrate what you guys are up to. But yeah, we're going to get back to that on Friday. We'll see what's feasible, how much it takes to fit in, like what we can fit in time-wise. As I was saying earlier in the stream, I'm buying a bunch of technology just to like physically be able to see and control all of it on the screen to try to get this working really well. Because so far I've been really loving this whole experience of like having daily art shared time with you guys, and then like finding more people through Twitch that are like want to participate. This is really cool. So I'm gonna keep it rolling and see how much we can scale it up. And in the meantime, I'm gonna do a fucking study and we can chit chat about whatever. But yeah, that's a behind the scenes thing. I've been having meetings for like half the morning. I didn't get out to the gym today. I like got up, I started working on tasks. I had meetings, I had breakfast, and I rushed over to stream from like 6 a.m. to noon. So, oh, it just reopens the Huckleberry website page. Fuck. Okay, so the link on Huckleberry, I'm gonna post the correct link in the chat here. It should buy on Amazon. Oh my god. It should be this, right? This should be the correct. Yeah. So I'm gonna post it in the chat. it's an affiliate link because I got affiliate links set up for all this shit. And then why can I not log in? Is there a different way to log into Squarespace websites now? You can no longer just hit the escape key? Ugh, what a pain. All right, I'm not going to fix this now. I'm going to make a note in Obsidian. Overflow tasks. Okay. All right. On to actually working on stuff.
Hell yeah. Oh man, the one I did yesterday, I didn't get it done. I was trying to implement the stuff you were telling me about the other day, and
Yeah.
it's hard. It's really hard. It's making me go slow.
Oh, here's the thing. The one I'm pulling today is even better for that because like you don't have any place to hide from rendering if it's just a big face.
Oh, okay.
Right. So
Sweet.
more taking the ruler straight to the wrist today.
All right. Let's do it.
Let's see. Image size.
Okay.
I gotta get oriented here.
Ah, man. Oh, this is nice. That is pretty. I like this.
Where do I find the image?
I'm about to post it. I'm scaling it up first. So it's another same size as the last one, 4.6. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, the question, hey, where are you posting that? Is like the thing I never want to hear again because I'm gonna like figure out a good solution and make it consistent.
Pete, I fixed the link.
Oh, you fixed the link? Oh, thank you so much. I'm gonna take it off my fucking Obsidian then. Hell yeah. All right. Did you fix all three of them?
That was the only broken one.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, Vanta TDM's asking, like, do you ever use 3D reference for light direction and whatnot? That's a really good idea. I mean, I know a lot of artists that do that. I don't personally do it just because I haven't touched 3D since I was in college. And that was a long time ago. So I've got Blender on my taskbar, and I'm not using it because I opened it up once and realized that it wasn't easier than all the 3D software that I used 20 years ago. And I immediately closed it. And it looks like a great idea. I mean, like figuring out complicated lighting problems is like something that everybody deals with, and being able to make your own boutique reference from scratch is like always so nice. So yeah, I really think it's a great idea. Like if you are thinking about doing it, go ahead and learn all the skills that I don't know. And then you will be in great shape, and I will be stuck catching up. It'll be awesome. You know what I've been thinking? Okay, so there's like two things I've been thinking about doing that I'm not doing because I'm like rushing into this right now. One of them is I do need to open up Ash's brushes and try out like some new brushes. I was talking about that yesterday, and because my morning was busy, I didn't get to it today, so I'm not going to do it. The other thing is I'm thinking that instead of being so precise about interpreting it, I think I need to actually make a blank canvas that's the wrong size intentionally, and then try to make intentional stylizations of like the proportions and stuff so that I'm not trying to do such a linear one-to-one copy, but really focusing on the content of the image, which is something I'm seeing Adam succeed with day after day. You know, putting his own spin on things, really just like being inspired by the source image instead of what I'm doing, which is trying to like have them be exact structural replicas of each other, like on a grid. And I think I would get more. I think one of the things I need to get better at is like learning how to interpret the reference rather than just like act like a photocopier about it. So I'm going to keep that in mind. Both those things I'm going to keep in mind for the future. Today, I don't know. I'm going to find something about this that is going to like drive me crazy. So Jazz, you're going to try to like beat your head against rendering again today, huh?
Yeah. I tried doing it yesterday, but remember that like reference image I showed you of that Aoyin Hatsu guy? I was trying to study that, and it was like too complicated. I spent an hour and a half.
Oh yeah.
The background rendered.
Yeah, we could have so it's like, so we're gonna have these, if we do different study tracks, right? One of them is probably gonna be like fashion photos, the other one's gonna be landscapes. Then I was thinking of adding in masterworks because, like, you know, putting a bunch of old Renaissance paintings or whatever couldn't hurt. What if one of them was all anime? What if one of them was just like all like highbrow anime pieces from like the best anime artists in the world, and it was just like, because like I want to meet people where they are, right? If you want to do anime studies, I could say, hey, you should try some Caravaggio or whatever. You'll learn a lot. And you could take those skills and then take it to anime. But like, I got to tell you, when I was first learning to draw when I was like 16, I refused to try to learn from anything that didn't look like the thing I wanted to make, which was anime. So like, I was like, people were like, hey, do you want to get this art instructional book? And I was like, no, not anime. I don't need it. And like, that's how they sold all those really terrible how to draw anime books back in the day, the one that's like a meme now, because every 16-year-old thought the same thing as me, and it wasn't right, but I mean, that's like where they were. It's where we've always been. By we, I mean the weebs. And so like, hey, maybe we meet the weebs where they are, right?
Yeah.
Could you help me curate a big pile of anime stuff to study?
I can. Yeah, sure. I'm super busy right now.
Yeah, not at the moment. I'm just saying.
But yeah.
I'm going to be putting together these other lists, and if you wanted to like help me out by like curating that list, like, because you seem like you're able to name a lot more contemporary anime artists than me.
Okay.
And
yeah,
so
I'm also following a lot of them on Twitter.
Yeah. And so like, yeah, we'll make a list of that too. And so if you say, okay, well, I'm just going to focus on these because this is like what I'm really into right now. Okay, fine. And then if you ever want to dip into any of the other stuff, like you have that option too.
Yeah. I also feel like one of the biggest barriers that like stops people from getting better at art is they do various things to themselves that make them not enjoy the process as much as they could.
Right.
And if you don't give a fuck about doing a study of like Caravaggio, don't do a study of Caravaggio. Like do whatever will make you draw more, you know?
Yeah, but it's like if you ever wanted to challenge yourself on like, okay, well, let's see. Like if you're like, okay, I really want to like learn some rendering, I should go to where people, you know, where in history people were doing like a lot of rendering. And, you know, it's not required, but it is an option.
Yeah.
I want the options that people actually want. And then also, you know, when they come around to like wanting to challenge themselves with something different, there's that too. And, you know, I'm not that stuffy of a person. So it's like, for Huckleberry, I want to be able to like offer the kinds of education that people want, not just what I think they need.
I want to go off on a brief tangent
about
how to draw anime books. So like one of the guys who like made those, so like we were having like a conversation a couple days ago about sort of like curiosity involved in like the process of getting better at art, right? Like how you need to be sort of like on the lookout for like ways in which your art could be improved or could be more like whatever you're aiming for and that kind of thing. And you were like concerned that maybe some people don't have that curiosity.
Yeah.
And you're like not sure how to foster people in it. I used to be terrified that might be me, right?
Really?
When I was just starting out. Yeah. Like when I was just starting out, I was like,
Maybe that's the
"Man,
sign that you aren't. If you're terrified that you aren't.
yeah, it probably is. But like, I used to worry that I'd turn into one of these people. Like, what if I'm not paying attention to the right things?
Uh huh.
Like, what if just drawing a lot isn't enough? And
Yeah.
like I've kind of accumulated enough evidence by now that like, no, just drawing a lot kind of is enough. But I used to think of this guy Kevin Hart. Is that his name?
Yeah.
Christopher Hart.
Kevin Hart.
Kevin Hart.
Kevin Hart is a comedian.
Okay, yeah. Christopher Hart is the How to Draw Anime guy.
Okay.
He is like mocked relentlessly on the internet for like drawing for like 15 years and not improving. And I was like, and when you said that thing the other day, I was like, oh yeah, I guess there kind of are some people who like.
I have met people who have 20 years of art history. Like they've drawn a lot. They've finished huge projects, independent projects. You know, they've been working for years. I've known them for years, and they're not better than they were in college, and they weren't that good in college.
Well, I went looking for like Christopher Hart again, and like, dude, he fucking took everybody's feedback on the internet and got better.
Really?
Yeah, his like new stuff is like significantly better than
that's
like
great.
his old stuff. Yeah.
So there's the push and pull, right? Like you I don't think that beating yourself up is a good strategy for getting better. Because like some people think that like, hey, I really try to say to myself, I'm a huge piece of shit and I suck at drawing, and so I'm going to keep and the reason I keep getting better is because I always hate myself, right? And I go, I don't think that's it, man. I don't think that's the path forwards. But there's on the other side, there's this complacency. Oh yeah, I know how to draw anime, and it's like, no, you don't. Like, you stink at it. Like, what? Not you. I'm talking about Christopher Hart back in the day, right?
Yeah.
He's like, oh yeah, I know how to do it, and it's like just full on Dunning-Kruger. Like, doesn't actually know how to do it, but like, is writing instructional books on it, and then lacking the kind of curiosity like helps push him forwards. But like. So like, yeah, beating somebody up online and being like, yeah, you suck. Did Jazz just? Oh wait, no. Telling somebody they suck and like isn't like a service to them. So like badgering someone online that they should be better at art, I don't think is like a good idea from like both a human being standpoint, but also just from an educational standpoint. Like, but it does feel like there is some balance of forces here where it's like, how do we both be curious, but how that curiosity requires a certain like lack of complacency. Like you're just not happy with where you're at artistically. You want to push forward, but also you need to be like kind of nice to yourself. Like you can't just think of yourself as a huge piece of shit who sucks at art all the time, because it might fuel some level of curiosity of wanting to get better, but it's also like pretty actively demotivating, and it also degrades your quality of life to a significant degree. So like I feel like there's a needle that needs to get threaded there in order to like figure that out. Do you think there's something instructive about that balance from the whole like Christopher Hart anecdote you're telling? Can we dig something like some extra wisdom out of this idea?
I don't know. The problem is the thing you were saying yesterday about art advice needing to be like tailored to the individual person is so true. Like the stuff that like I needed to have screamed at me when like I was younger is like very different from the stuff that like Christopher Hart needed to have screamed at him when he was like, like earlier in his career or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, yeah, I mean, there's some people where like, they kind of need to be told like, no, you're doing okay. Like they need to be built up more. And there's some people where like, maybe
yeah, you're like, you're actually really good at art, and you should keep going, and you're great, and you're a worthwhile person, and everybody likes you. And then some people need to be like, hey, listen, you need to chill. You need to chill out. You need to cool your jets. You need to have a little bit more humility. And like, be more open to some of these things that people are telling you, because there's big lessons out there that you're missing out on.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's like there's this balance, and the question of like where are you in that balance is maybe not something that everyone can self-assess, which I think is probably true, right?
Yeah.
I think it's easy to assume that like, yeah, different people need different things. Not crazy.
Yeah. The trouble is it's a big problem if you're trying to like teach people, right? Like
If you're trying to teach people you're not talking to, yes. If you're trying to teach somebody who is like a theoretical person in a crowd from a stage, yes, it's really hard because you can't be like, the key is humility, right? Right.
Word.
Because this is why this is just me calling back to my rant from yesterday. It's like this is why that shit doesn't work. It's like it is absolutely the right advice for someone, but it's not the right advice for everyone. And like the thing I found is that for every piece of advice that's like 100% correct, there's someone out there for whom the advice is 100% incorrect, and it's like they need the exact opposite. And like knowing what you need as a person is really difficult because like, and this is why people go to therapy, because they're like, I know something's wrong, I just don't know what to do about it. But it's also like, you know, what I think you can get out of a really good mentor or art school is to have somebody look at your stuff and tell you like, no, you were really good at this one thing, you need to learn this other thing.
Yeah, for sure. I've been saying for like a while now that like artists need therapists as much as they need teachers.
Sure.
Like it's all a big head game to some degree.
It is a game, like a lot of games, that takes place in the mind, right? Like I think about this all the time, like what is the game we're actually playing here, and like what is the skill, what are we trying to maximize for, not just with art but with like a lot of stuff. Like I love watching StarCraft sometimes, professional StarCraft, and like the game is like it's a game of two people hooked up to each other like some sort of Star Trek episode where they've got like weird sci-fi helmets on, and it is a game of like who can split their attention better, right?
Yeah.
And it's doing like it's almost like if you're in the gym and you're doing like one particular machine, and you're like, this machine works this exact one muscle group. Like StarCraft is a game that is like at its core just a machine that measures how good are you at splitting attention quickly. And that's the game that they're playing. And if like everyone in the room cares about who's the best in the room at splitting your attention quickly, StarCraft gets really interesting. And for everyone else, no one gives a shit. Like it doesn't matter. None of it matters. And so like I think that's one of the things that we kind of fail to appreciate about art is that like oftentimes when we're doing something like, you know, doing a study or making a painting of an original character or something, like we are trying to demonstrate some very discrete skill set, but it's often unclear on what that skill is and why anyone's impressed by it. Like I don't think that we always have like a really clear narrative of like, oh wow, this person's good at, you might say like, oh, they're really good at details or color, or like you might just say that they have like a good vibe to their work or whatever, but it's demonstrating some discrete skill that we don't entirely know how to put our finger on, which I find that to be fairly interesting because like you can really look at a lot of things in the world through the lens of like figuring out exactly what it is that what is the game that we're playing, what is the thing we're trying to measure by like doing some activity to impress each other or to like grow as people or whatever. And I think art as like a single skill is like partially misunderstood because there's actually a lot of different things that an artist can do and can be good at. And like but it's like they manifest through a JPEG in the end most of the time or on a canvas, but there are actually a bunch of really interesting discrete skills that are on display anytime anyone makes a piece of art.
Yeah. Sometimes you even see people who don't have much experience making art jump right into it and do some things that are like kind of impressive because they have like a different skill set. They're like knowledgeable about like some esoteric thing, and it like shows in their art.
Yeah. And like what happens is like I'm gonna get to the chat in just a second because I'm seeing people are also commenting, but it's like sometimes there's like communities that get built and they care about like they have different communities have different values, right? And so like one community will pop up and it'll be like the fantasy illustration community, and they will value like this discrete set of skill sets that manifest in like nicely rendered things that look like they should be in a D&D book. But it's not representing the complete suite of what you can do as an artist. And so they look at all this other art and they just like write it all off. But like the communities that actually enjoy the art might actually value different things. And this is the thing I've noticed over and over again is that these like bubbles that form, they have these like shared values, but like they totally have these incredible blind spots for these other qualities that people compete on that they don't value, and they don't even notice the competition's happening. And so people become completely invisible because they are, because they're not competing on the same dimension as like the rest of the community. And so like they get blown off and they get ignored. But they're potentially doing something really interesting and being very, very good at it. And like there's a whole group of people that appreciate them for it. And no one even knows it's happening inside these like bubble communities because everyone's tuned to only pay attention to a core set of things and ignore everything else. And I always find that super fascinating because I've watched it happen personally, and it's like, it's incredible to like feel like you sort of like tune your visual lens a little bit and you start seeing different people are standing in the room with you. You didn't even realize were there. It's like you're traveling between dimensions. Like, I had this moment at like Gen Con one year where I was like, oh, I was like at the bar afterwards talking with some of the artists. I was like, oh, that guy, Nigel Sade. And they're like, I don't know who that is. I was like, it's the guy that dresses like a pirate. And they're like, no, it doesn't ring a bell. I was like, he has a booth that's 20 feet wide and 20 feet tall that's looking into the artist alley over on the far side. And they go, we didn't see it. And I'm like, I go there the next day, and there is a booth that's 20 feet wide and 20 feet tall that's visible from the entire artist alley because it's so big. You can see over the whole artist alley and see this guy's booth in the distance. And it's being manned by a group of people that are all dressed in pirate cosplay. And not a single artist I met that day noticed it existed. And he's there selling art. And it was like on the ground, there was a carpet. And like the artist alley was on the brown carpet, and then the dealer's hall was on red carpet. And I was like, if you were in the brown carpet, you were visible. And if you were on the red carpet, you were just on the other end of a force field and you were invisible. And it was like selective attention. And I couldn't believe it because like I felt like there was something to be learned from this guy who had this way bigger art business, and he was there at the same show, ostensibly playing the same game as everybody else, and no one could even see him. I thought that was incredible. But yeah, it's like it's this totally different set of values, and so like oftentimes I find that like newcomers into a community spend a certain amount of time like acclimating themselves to figuring out, what's the game we're playing? And then they start writing off a bunch of stuff that they're interested in or that they like because they want to attune their values to the people around them. And they give up on a lot of things that are like cool and interesting about themselves in favor of conformity. And I'm always trying to like see that happen and like stop people and go like, no, you're valid. You're good. You should like what you like. You just need to find the place where people actually care about that stuff too, instead of worrying about whether or not you're good at drawing a dragon, because who fucking cares? Like, I mean, who fucking cares is there's a whole group of people that care a lot. But like, why do we say that, they're right and our own instincts about what we like is wrong? Like it's so much more, I feel like it's so much more important that we find people that share our values to have a community with rather than assuming that there's like a hierarchy in play. And like this is one of the reasons why I'm like so suspicious of hierarchies, because like in art is because I see these different bubbles forming that all have these different hierarchies that are all measured in different ways, and like none of them are right or wrong. They just all have their preferences and they all group together. So anyways, that's the end of the rant. What did I miss in the chat while I was on that? Yeah, Vanta TDM is saying that there's somebody who's ended Eden Oyeyu so many balls. Talking about getting frustrated and discouraged, not continuing with digital pieces. Man, I'm always trying to figure out why people get frustrated and dump out of art so I can try to jump in and save them. Because art's fucking fun.
I had that problem for a long time.
You want to know, and they want to know how my brushes are set up. And I feel like I do this demo just about every other day, and I'm always happy to do it. My default brush, I want to give it a real name because it's on the tool preset. It's called 8010. I was thinking about calling it the Sable brush. This is my default brush. It is, at its heart, just a regular round brush where the pressure sensitivity is set to the shape dynamics. I have size jitter set to pen pressure. The maximum at 0. I have the spacing set down to 5% so that the individual brush strokes are pretty close together. And that's it on the brush panel. So shape dynamics, closer spacing, and then the one big thing I do is I turn the flow down to 10%. Shift 1 on the keyboard will get you there. And the difference in the flow is like, here's what the flow turned all the way up. Here's the flow turned down. And that gives me the ability to have that more natural looking stroke. It's not all the other settings, it's the flow. But the very, very simplest brush you can make with the flow turned down will give you a little bit more of that natural look without having to like do anything super fancy in terms of like texture or whatever. I use a rougher brush at first to try to not get overly precious about how I'm starting my work. But I have historically made all of the texture in my paintings using a round brush and just being picky about it. And as I've been doing these studies, I'm finding that the sooner I go back to the round brush, the better the overall piece looks in the end. Because then I'm not like inserting a bunch of random bullshit like sketchiness. I'm actually just like, using my hand. What were you going to say, Jazz? I like cut you off.
Oh, I just said, like, I pretty much said what I wanted to say, which was just like I used to have like a lot of problems finishing things. I know how that person in the chat feels probably.
What do you think was like a big thing that helped you start to finish stuff again?
I'm a huge perfectionist, and the thing that was stopping me was just not having the skills to actually achieve the level of finish, like a level of finish similar to like the references I was looking at.
Yeah.
So what I needed to do, and this worked for me, was just set like a time limit for the piece, and I just have like 20 hours or whatever to make it as good as I can. And after 20 hours are up, like it's done. And just doing that a few times made me a lot more comfortable with finishing things.
My advice on this topic is the exact opposite of yours, because of course the exact opposite of every good piece of advice is also true to different people. I used to have a hard time finishing stuff, and then what I did is I started committing to having an unlimited amount of time to finish something. I would presume it was going to take 100 hours to finish, and I would commit to doing everything the hardest possible, most manual way. And then I would hold myself to the highest standard I could, and I would just try to like figure out what I needed to do to push up past where I was on the piece to get a step higher. And by holding myself to that impossible standard, but also giving myself enough time to like make every correction I could ever dream of, it would take me 40 to 60 hours to finish a painting, but the quality of my painting shot through the roof instantly. And then I got faster, quicker.
I did that as well. Like once I kind of got over like the perfectionist tendencies and knew like, oh, I can kind of like make something, then I like followed your advice. And I was actually following your advice. Like I've heard you give this advice.
Oh, okay.
On, like, like this. And that worked too. Like I went from having a bunch of like finished things that weren't very good, but at least having some finished things, to having some finished things that like were really good but took me like 80 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
so, like they both kind of work.
And then over time I was like, I'm going to do that again, and I guess I'm just going to commit to another 60 hours or whatever. And then, one day I like do a piece and it's like kind of it's like a simpler piece. And, I finish it in like 2 hours. I'm like, yo, what the fuck? Like, what just happened? Because, like, you build up a set of skills, like, small skills of just like, I know how to do this, I know how to do that. And you push through it, and it doesn't take that much time. And then, you hold yourself to the same standard. Or maybe you relax a little bit at times, but it's actually totally doable to, like, you get a lot faster, I think, by also holding yourself to really high standards really early. Just because you have to do things a certain way. Like, you have to get certain things right in order to get to the end. And once you've done that, it's easier to retread that same ground. And that way, like, you actually get quicker by attempting to be as slow as possible.
I just
the opposite
recently,
is also true.
I just recently came to that conclusion myself. I was working on pieces and I realized I wasn't reaching the level I really wanted the piece to go in. And then I'm like, all right, next time I make a piece, I'm just gonna, if it takes 100 hours, it takes 100 hours, but I'm gonna just spend all my time working on this until it reaches a level of where I'm happy.
Oh, I just got a suggestion for the chat here on Discord. I should name the brush the Huckleberry brush, and I might do that. Thank you, Real Jangus. That's a really good idea. Also, I forgot to do at what is the Twitch notifications? I forgot to do that stream. Okay. Yeah, if you guys ever want to be notified about when I'm going to go live on the Discord, there is a role you can use. Go to under the Welcome tab, get roles here, and you can sign up. And I will send out an at to people who have signed up for the Twitch notifications to let them know when I'm going live so you can come and join us. All right. Should have done that at the beginning of the thing. I'll build the habit.
Only a couple times, like, rendered a cool light source.
Cool as in cold, or cool as in cowabunga? Cool.
Kind of both, actually. Like, I'm very timid about, like, my lighting because I'm, like, not very confident with it. So I just go for, like, stuff I've kind of done before or whatever. But also, I always just kind of default to picking like a warm light. And so this study, like, what the hell? Her skin's like blue.
You can try to do it with all warm colors and just defy the source material.
I could.
Part of the reason I liked this as a study source is because it, like, being already a bit of a weird color palette, it kind of invites trying to remix it.
Okay. I like that it's colorful too. I want to experiment more with like weird colors and things.
Yeah, I like this reference a lot. I'm a fan.
I haven't done these in a while, man. This is a great reference to do.
Yeah, I the story of doing these is that I'd never done them ever in 20 years, and then I tried to do one live on a stream, and I was so bad at it that I was like, "Ooh, I should probably do these every day." Like, I really want to invite people who feel like they either feel like they should be studying more or they should start studying, because it's like when it comes to photo studies, it's like I've started from a cold start too. Like, I guess warm-ish start because I have so many years of painting experience, but this is kind of fresh territory for me. I think anybody who wants to learn to paint can just get started wherever they feel like, wherever they feel comfortable. And they could probably make it from zero to being a professional artist in, even if they stick around and just hang out and keep making stuff and keep studying and, just, if you like it, keep doing it. I felt like I was learning super fast doing these. What were you saying?
Yeah, it also feels good to have something like done every day. One of the things I noticed when I was grinding away at said 100-hour plus painting is that it gets kind of grindy if you're not doing something fresh.
Yeah.
And having a study that you can sort of put a notch on each day, I think it's feeling quite good. So I appreciate that you're doing this.
I was wondering if I would start to procrastinate less on art if I was making art more of a daily habit. I've never had a daily habit of art throughout the years of being indie. And I thought, well, maybe part of the problem is that I haven't made a good place for it, because whatever struggles I'm having with my mainline paintings, it just prevents me from working on any art. Like if I'm going to struggle with a painting, why not just make something easy instead and just be making something? And I was wondering if I would procrastinate less, but instead, I got back from vacation, I got a few things done, and then I immediately got super depressed and started procrastinating really hard. So I was like, well, okay, that was an interesting theory, but I don't think it panned out. It's been really nice. I feel like I'm getting better at art again for the first time in a while. And I really enjoy having art be a part of my day every day, but it's not like a miracle cure that is solving all of my ills. But I do wonder what it's going to do to my brain over the course of a year. Doing it for a week was great. Doing it for a month was awesome. But what does a year worth of studies do to somebody like me who already has an art background? It's a.
So can I interject something?
Yeah.
One thing that I learned from my old art school though is that this is something that we're not typically do on everyday basis. One thing that I learned from them is that it's not particularly sort of what's the word for productive for you to draw every day, or just spend just 2 days of the week where you just do art all of it. So that way the other day of the week you're supposed to be doing everything outside of drawing. Be yourself, live life, be with family, because those are the kind of helps you recharge your energy. And then once you get back to the art school, that's when things get serious.
Sure.
Yeah, those art classes I had back and then it's only two classes, 2 days per week, and most of it is just spending time studying everything stuff outside. And this is refreshing, just doing outdoors, getting some inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
I do some sketching now and then, right? But mostly just me enjoying myself, just lifestyle, right? Improving it. Yeah. And the last word from my last mentor that said to me that if your lifestyle is improving, then your art should be improving as well, right? Gotta have that little equilibrium of balance. It's maybe not the best for everyone though, but that's what I feel should be said out there. So if I ever heard any artist that's saying, "No, I don't have enough sleep, man," then get some sleep, man.
Yeah, no artist should ever be poop socking their way to victory. You should never be just doing. Some people tell me "Oh, I'm going to be so good. I'm going to do 12 hours of studies every single day until I'm the best artist or whatever." And I'm always that's a stupid idea and you shouldn't do it. I don't know about only doing art 2 days out of the week, because I don't think it's that big of a I've been enjoying spending an hour or two chilling with the homies and doing studies. It's not exhausting. It's refreshing. What am I supposed to do instead? Am I supposed to watch television?
Yeah, I think there's a
what else am I doing
between say like a student who hasn't built. I actually just made a video about this. People are asking like if they should send their kids to art school, like young kids, like 3, 4, 5. And I was discussing how, well, the difficulty with young kids is when you're young, as a person, we all develop different things at different speeds. And a curriculum might be targeting a weakness in the kid that actually stunts their development, rather than if they were just on their own drawing for fun. Because when they draw for fun, they naturally build up their focus, their ability to sit down for long periods of time. The task itself getting easier, so it drains less energy when they do sit down. And the biggest difference between professionals and students is professionals can just turn on a default level of artistic performance every single day for a certain amount of time. It might be 3 hours, 6 hours, 9 hours, somewhere between there, but they can do something every day, and it gives no fatigue.
Yeah.
You know, because they're just so practiced at, doing it, and they've built up all of the, ancillary muscles, the mental muscles, the emotional muscles, whatever, to be able to do that without it taking energy. I think when you're an art student, there's so much attached to it. And not to get too psychological, but I do think this is a factor. Most students are in their minds trying to get good at art, right? Most professionals have a certain level of validation. So there's just one thing they're not trying to do when they're just performing, right? Like if a professional just has a job to do and it's got to be in by 5 o'clock and it's a 4-hour job and it's 1 o'clock, they're just like, all right, I just got to sit down and knock this out real quick. You know what I mean? And I might have to turn a 4-hour job into a 3.5-hour job in case I need to correct something or get feedback or what have you. So they just have to do it. And, they're not trying to get better when they do that. But for a student, it's very difficult to work in that mindset when you've had no validation. And I'm generalizing, when you've had no validation for your skills yet. So it takes much more effort because you're not just trying to work on the picture, you're abstractly trying to get good in a value way that really doesn't have anything to do with what you're working on. It just has to do with being young and experiencing something new.
Yeah, maybe. I'm distracted here because somehow my rubber stamp managed to switch brushes in a way that was like acting crazy. What is going on? Yeah, because it's like I'm not using the whole breadth of my skill set when I'm doing these. This is part of the reason I can like do this and talk at the same time. It's because it's like it's not exercising every ounce of my creativity in order to like do a photo study or even like render a painting. Because like rendering a painting doesn't require me to use my whole brain.
Yeah.
Right.
But for somebody who's still learning, it could be much more challenging for them to like be attempting to like render, and so the idea of doing it while they're talking or doing it it's like it even just including it as part of the day could be a lot more exhausting. But
and that's because information is exhausting, right?
Yeah.
So when you're taking in a whole bunch of new information, that's exhausting, no matter what it is. Like you ever go to even if it's a video game, right? Like I wasn't a Diablo player before. And when Diablo 4 came out, I'm like, all right, I want to learn how to play this game. And there's just so many numbers. If you haven't been playing ARPGs, I'd watch a video on one build. And I'm like, okay, I need to walk around. And it's a video game that I'm not even playing. I'm just watching people talk about crit percentage and lucky hit. I'm like, okay, that's enough for now. That's happening to art students, but it's just with art. Whereas when you're a professional or professional level person, so much of that has gone into your autopilot. So it's not drawing energy from it.
That's what it says in my Twitter bio, professional level person.
That's awesome.
Right next to it.
But yeah, it's in your autopilot. So it's not taking as much energy. So now you can do it every day. So I do think, drawing as training to become a professional, your schedule is very different than once you're looking at yourself as, okay, I'm trying to get at the performance level, not the quality level. That's a different thing. Being able to achieve a certain quality is different than being able to achieve a certain level of performance. Quality has no limit on it. right? If I say you have 1,000 hours to make a good drawing or painting, whatever, if you can get there, good job. But if I say turn this in by 3 o'clock, then the performance is how much of your skills can be represented in that time. And that's an entirely different, not entirely different, but it's a different aspect of the discipline.
Yeah, it's a different angle to think about it. I'm really curious what happens with, I mean, like, when people are doing studies like this, it's like for daily studies, I don't think it's important that people try to push themselves to like incredible new heights. Like that's part of the way I've been treating it, is just as like a casual, fun activity that is sort of creating passive learning. Like I think there's a certain amount of pushing myself I always do when I'm working on my paintings, and I want to like I don't feel like I have the necessary skills to get them done, and I need to like grow as an artist in order to accomplish what I want. That can be really painful and really intense. And like, I mean, that's one of the reasons I like haven't streamed historically, is because I was working on paintings that were pushing me to, I was trying to push myself to do the best job I possibly could. And it like, you can't do that while you're streaming, because streaming just takes just too much of your brain power to be able to like do that and also perform at peak level. But like, I don't think that even if somebody's just a beginner artist, that they should be putting 100% of their brain into like their daily study pieces. Because it's like, I think it's a different mindset. I think it's a different activity. Like that's sort of the whole point of them, is that they should be like kind of dumbed down. Like they should be easy. They should be like an opportunity to like, you know, grow passively and like, you know, step away from the intense grind of like feeling like you need to be producing your next masterwork, and instead just like, you know, enjoy the process of making art. Because like enjoying the process of making art is like a big part of long-term success as well. And, you know, you're not going to do it by like, you know, sometimes making your new best piece is going to be really uncomfortable. And so you can't just depend that every single piece you're going to make is going to be a joy to work on. But like, you can always just chill with your homies and make something easy.
So I think that there's a human element to that. I don't think you're wrong, but I do think that there's a reason that wouldn't work for some people. And
what, to like make art, just have a fun time treating it like a craft?
Some people
yes.
don't like fun.
Yeah, actually, because some people, especially when they're crossing over from like, oh, I like doing this, to I want to do this and be good at it, right? But I'm not good at it. And my eyes are good enough and my taste is good enough that I can recognize good things, and I can look at what I'm doing and I recognize that it's not good. So now I'm on the journey to close that gap. And so then it becomes very difficult for them to have fun, because now they've got this monkey on their back, constantly reminding them when you're done with this, it's not going to be very good. And so what they need on that road, which, you know, they'll get there if they're working in a focused manner. But so maybe it's a year to 3 years, let's just say, depending on their area of development. Along that road, they need wins, right? They can't find comfort without the wins first. So if they're struggling with drawing from observation, I think those people they can pick one thing to work on and be okay with everything else not being all right. So if they're just working on, you know, purely structure or purely proportion, it's okay if the lighting isn't working. They can say in their minds, we're not doing that today, and just get into a training mindset. I think that's how they can lower the mental stack that you're kind of referring to. It's that mental stacking. It's looking at a whole bunch of things at one time and working on all of them when you're really maximizing your potential, versus the opposite is completely relaxed, just having fun, not really worried about the outcome, just arting for the sake of arting. And passively, I am definitely getting better. I'm assured of that. But someone who's never been in their own minds good, and good is not even a term I really like to apply to art, because it leads down to erroneous thinking. But in their minds, it's important, because that's how they think of it. I'm not good. I need to be good. How can I possibly have fun when I suck? So they need a way to have some fun, but also still be getting those wins that they need to be assured that they're not a failure.
I mean, to me, that sounds more like it's a phenomenon down the dimension of neuroticism rather than skill of art. Because I remember when I was bad at art, there was never a time where I couldn't do a form of my practice that was not enjoyable, even when I knew I was bad. Because I think we all, I think your point is that, like, you reach a certain point when you're learning where you kind of fall out of the Dunning-Kruger, how do you want to call it, sort of a romantic phase of learning, and then you kind of are hit with the reality of what your current skill set is. But I mean, before you got there, it's like I can't imagine anybody who is drawn to making art didn't find some part of that process enjoyable. And I don't really think that is unattainable even for people who are in that sort of learning zone, that pain zone.
Well, I don't think this is a one-size-fits-all thing. I think, like anything, it's on the spectrum. There's a great yeah. There's a great saying.
When you've got an artistic brain, you're on the artistic spectrum.
Yeah. Knicks head coach Tom Thibodeau said this. He has a saying. He said, "Winning is more fun than fun is fun." Right. And I think some people inherently they get into a mode where they operate like that, where they need wins more than they need fun. That's just what would nourish them. And when I say this, and I'm not trying to like name drop or anything, but I've worked in, I think, 4 art studios with a lot of really, really high level talent. And I would say I probably saw this phenomenon in roughly 3 out of 4 people. 60% was the lowest I'd put it at, maybe 65% is the absolute lowest I'd put at people who were, when they were at that point of like, I'm trying to really be good at this. That's the only kind of, dopamine that they could receive. You know what I mean? Is the dopamine of victory over whatever challenges they were having.
I mean, I've seen that. I've met those people too, and like I honestly think that some of them are just lacking self-awareness into what is actually motivating them, because like so much of like that, the high-level industry is still poisoned by a sense of insecurity. Like a huge number of the top performing artists I've met are, they say things like, "Oh, I'm good because I constantly beat the shit out of myself, for not being good enough." And but they also have this horrible habit of getting really insecure and uncomfortable when they start seeing good art. Like whenever they go to like a museum or they like see a cool piece of art online, instead of being able to draw something from it and celebrate it, they start shrinking and start becoming really uncomfortable and self-conscious. And they have a hard time. I actually think it steps in the way of them finishing work. I think it steps in the way of them experimenting. I think it steps in the way of them forming relationships. And it's really, really unhealthy. Hey, Got Artist is rating us at the party of 21. Thanks, Got Artist. Just really appreciate it. How's it going? First time chat from a Raider. Thank you so much. So I know there's this attitude out there, and it's like widely celebrated, but I'm like a long-time skeptic of it because I've been professional for a really long-ass time too. And it's like I see that attitude, but I'm not convinced of it just because like that's the story that people who are in that space tell themselves about the value of, being neurotic, about being a top performer and how like valuable that can be. But like I see there is a downside to it. There's a drawback to it. And like without acknowledging the trade-offs, it has the real potential to be a weakness. And like the total lack of conversation about that, I think is sort of proof of like that there's a more self-aware, more mindful approach to this that is potentially even more valuable than just like, treating yourself like, in this like, incredibly abusive way about how, the only fun I can have is being the best. It's like, it's like, I mean, if you've been in those spaces, you've seen the way that people get really, really weird about seeing good art. They shrink back, they get defensive, they start feeling sad in the presence of the kind of thing that they used to enjoy. And like I have a hard time believing that that is what peak performance looks like. That's like a total lack of confidence, and it leads to like it leads to really toxic environments where people have a hard time building each other up. There's a lot of like, in those spaces, there's a really intense sense of competition, but not a camaraderie, but like a kind of like, you end up with these really toxic environments where people like, they start to, tear each other down in subtle ways, or like be really oppressive towards outsiders, and like it becomes really insular and really negative. And I've always been pushed away from those kinds of spaces, and I don't think that the people in those spaces even realize how much they're actually like pushing talent away from professional spaces by maintaining those kinds of attitudes. And it's like barely even discussed, because it's held up on this pedestal of like, this is the mindset you need to have to be great. But like, I mean, don't you see some of that? Don't you see that like toxicity and like
I want to be very
negativity?
clear. I'm not pedestalizing this. I'm identifying a developmental trend. So
Okay.
as it's a developmental trend by its very nature, I associate it with either immaturity of, technical development, immaturity of professional development, or immaturity of personality development. And I think it manifests differently in different people. I wouldn't, just as a sidebar, I wouldn't associate it with the phenomenon of people being intimidated by great art. I think that's a separate thing, because I have seen the one thing exist independently of the other. I've literally seen two people who have opposite reaction to great art, but both have that, what you guys are describing as neuroticism. And it might just be that, artistic development draws a lot of people who are in a neurotic place in their development. So for me, it's less about, is this good or is this bad? More so than, well, I recognize at what point in your development you are and what you need right now to get past this quicker. You know what I mean? And for me, it's much easier if somebody was doing this study and say their, structure was off. It's much easier for me to just say, okay, well, the big thing that you're looking at here is you haven't studied the skull yet. So there are some things that if you knew the skull intuitively, this would all make more sense to you. And they go, oh, that makes me feel better. And then now they can go and develop and not only get better at it, but now next time they might be able to have more fun, because now they're exploring the skull. Then it is to convince them, oh, you should just relax, because they're not going to relax. I'm not a psychologist. I can't do that. I can't change them. I'm an artist, so I can just give them artistic knowledge and encourage them. So I'm not really judging the virtue and of that area of development. I'm just saying I've seen it a lot. And to your point, I've seen every shade of it in studios. I've seen people who were just downright nasty to each other, and I have people from several studios I've worked in that are brothers for life. I could call them right now, be like, hey, I need to sleep on your couch for 3 weeks, and I'll be like, dude, when are you coming by? Right? So it's covered the entire gamut of human experience in my thing. And that's why I bring it up, because amongst different diverse levels of talent, personality type, even age, background, that consistency of when people are really trying to get better, maybe they do get more neurotic. But I'm just identifying it and saying, well, if a person's like that, this might be the easier solution.
Yeah. What were you gonna say, Jess?
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, I don't know, like I'm kind of on Pete's side here. Like the thing you're saying about like doing studies as a way to like boost your morale because it's like easier and less painful than jumping into the creative thing. I feel like that's a trap for some people. I feel like I wasted like the first 5 years of like my development as an artist because I was doing that. I'm super neurotic. I took like a personality test for like the 5 dimensions or whatever, and I scored like top 1% in like neuroticism. Yeah, and like it's painful. Like when you suck, for somebody like me anyway, it's really, really painful when you suck, and you want to do things and you don't have the skills to pull it off, and it makes you really, really not want to do it because your brain hurts, and your feelings hurt. But like the thing that worked for me and the thing that's made me enjoy art more, is actually getting away from only doing studies and like doing more creative stuff and just enduring the upfront pain that like ensues. Like, and the other thing too was like, the guy who helped me more than anything with just drawing more, and like that's the number one most important thing. Like, if you want to get good at drawing, is just make fuck tons of art. Like, everything else is just kind of like salad dressing. And it's just like, that guy, like, he goes on all the time with artists, right? Like, he publishes the Q&As for his like mentorships, and it's just tons and tons of really insecure, neurotic artists approaching him with questions that are born out of insecurity, and every time he just tells them, like, you know, it's okay to suck, it's completely normal, everybody who's good now was an amateur at some point. The most important thing is to put in the time. The only thing separating you from the people you admire is just mileage. You'll get there eventually. Just try not to freak out so much about it, and like just put in the time. And like that advice is like the thing that's helped me more than anything. Like, I feel like there's way too much worrying on some people who are like me, about like studying the right things, about having the right technique, about like being on the right path or whatever, and about their performance, right? When like none of that stuff actually matters, and the only thing separating them from like where they want to be is just like time. And they'd do better if they just like kept their chin up.
I'm lost in where we were talking about this conversation. I had it for a bit,
sorry.
and now I'm like, no, it's not your fault. I'm just saying out loud. I was like, oh, maybe I should jump in and say something smart, and then I'm like, yeah, I don't remember how this all ties together at the moment.
It's we were kind of, I don't fully remember either.
Neurotic people and their tendencies to I don't know.
Like, you guys were talking about like
Well, I mean, we were talking a little bit about, like, there's this fetishization that happens, especially in, like, the sort of, I think the entertainment art industry, you know, video game studios, movie studios and stuff, there's this sort of fetishization of, like, you know, always pushing to be the best, need to always be learning, need to always, like, be getting better, need to always be beating the competition, and, like, this, like, this fetishization of mastery. But, like, I'm always been a bit suspicious of it because, like, partially because of what I was talking about earlier, where I see mastery is really kind of dependent on the values of the community you're in, but also, like, because I've seen it lead to a lot of really incredibly, like, insecure and defensive behavior inside communities that lead to, like, them becoming toxic and insular in ways that, like, I find not only to be not productive towards mastery, but, like, deeply unproductive in other ways. Like, especially when it comes to, like, dealing with people who are outside the community. So, like, you know, you talk about, oh, well, there's all these people that I would deem as brothers and they can come sleep on my couch. But, like, in the same environments where I see people treating each other like that, I find that there's, like, a group of people who have a lot to contribute, who are being kept on the outside because they have been, like, treated in actively hostile ways by that community that's, like, saying, no, we love each other, we all want the same thing, we're all positive. But it's actually, like, there's this intense competition that leads to a sort of, like, insular, toxic environment that has, like, actively pushed a lot of people out. And, like, I don't even think people see it most of the time because from within these communities, they see themselves as meritocracies. But it, as an outsider, it doesn't look like that way to me at all.
So from the inside looking out, I can tell you the difference between the studios was all leadership, right? So the leadership element is what fostered going through the various. Because again,
well, I mean, but I don't think it's not even just at the studios, but in the community level at larger, like the people who show up to workshops, like people who, like, participate around online forums, like, and the way that skews demographics and the way that those skewed demographics continue to skew further over time. Like, it's, like, I mean, holistically across the whole community.
Well, I really can only speak about the people that I've seen, right? Because when it comes to the internet, there's so many different backgrounds. Some people are just starting, some people are really just having a bad day and coming in differently. Whereas inside of a studio and in a professional environment, so I'm not just talking about literally studios I've been in, but also, conventions and stuff like that,
Right.
collaborations, larger projects. People are actually working together, right? And so the difference between the levels of toxicity has been really about leadership. And to your point, I think we speak in these absolutes, right? And we say stuff like mastery, and we say stuff like competition and all of this other stuff. I don't view art that way at all. I just recognize that other people do. So again, when I talk about this stuff, this is not me advocating my perspective. My perspective is just to help people develop in whatever way works best for them at the moment. Because as long as they get there, I don't care how they get there. I don't like judge people's journey, right? So I've seen people super neurotic and they got there. I've seen people cool as a cucumber and they've gotten there. It all works out. But the leadership is what mattered. And the reason leadership mattered was kind of a little bit of what you alluded to. If the leader in the community has a healthy perspective, that contextualizes all of the struggles that artists can go through, whether they be technical, personal, whatever it may be. Those struggles can be overcome if they have a good context. So the studio where there was no negativity, there was nobody, there's no enemies in the studio, there's nobody who's like bitter towards each other, everybody still generally supports each other and most people are rather close, is a comic book studio called Top Cow. And the leader of Top Cow was a man named Mark Silvestri, who used to draw the X-Men a while ago. And so Mark is a legend in the comic book industry. And he's also so chill and so generous, but also so good, especially if you see him work personally, right? That other people's egos, other people's insecurities, they had a safety net. And so whether someone was one track mind on, I need to be the best, I'm super competitive, whether somebody was just like, I just want to do my own thing and find my own style, whatever attitude people had, they could develop within their personality and within their mind frame because they had an environment that they could develop in. The worst environment that I've ever been in, I'm not going to name it because I don't want to indict certain people, but it was a studio where the people at the top were selfish. And all they cared about was results and numbers. And so that created amongst a group of younger artists, because this was a studio I was in when I was a bit younger, a survival of the fittest mentality. And so then people's insecurities were the thing that drove the vehicle of their development, rather than an aspirational cooperative at the end. Because at the end of the Top Cow, we were all brothers. We were always trying to be a great studio together, right? Whereas in this other studio, it was like a sports thing. Who's going to score 25 points for me tonight? You know what I mean? And so that brought out this. So I think there's so much of a personal, individualized element. I don't think there's a one size fits all in the moment. I think over the course of life, there's an overall healthy place that, in my opinion, the best artists usually get to. There's occasionally a really great artist who I'm like, wow, it's weird that you're so good and you're still that insecure. But a lot of, and I'm not just talking about art, even like even musicianship, like because I play guitar and I've been lucky enough to meet some of my heroes. They're like the chillest people in the world because they recognize the most important thing is that art is about self-discovery and sharing that with other people who are also looking to discover themselves. It's not about how good you are. It's not about how much money you make and all this other stuff that people put importance on, And so once they realize that they get to a point where they go, I was feeling a certain way and I wasn't nearly as good as I thought I was, right? Or I got all of this stuff when I wasn't that good. And when I got way better, I didn't get as much stuff. I know how much being really, really good actually matters. Not that it doesn't matter, but it doesn't matter as much as I thought when I was 19, 25, even 30 years old. But now that I'm 40, 50, whatever the person is, they're like, yeah, I have a perspective on this. And they really just have a generally generous spirit that's about storytelling and inviting other people to share in storytelling. And if a leader of any community, whether it's a single studio or a larger art community, if they have that quality, I think people will get past whatever point of their development they're in.
I mean, I totally agree about like community personalities sort of emanating from the leaders, from the leadership. Because I mean, I've seen it go good and I've seen it go bad, and like it's actually it's a little bit magical sometimes because it's like I know there's a process for it, like features like ways in which the community culture gets formed like from the top down, but it does almost seem to form in a kind of mystical way where it's like you'll see aspects of somebody's personality coming out of another person's mouth, due to the fact that like the community culture is like being created from the top levels. And it like I mean part of the reason I dumped out of working in the games industry was because my two first jobs that I got, my two main gigs that I had in studios, the company culture at both of them was awful. And it left a really bad impression on me for what it's like to work in those kinds of environments, because it was just watching really terrible environments get formed through bad management. And I did my best to try to when I was a art lead at a game studio, I did my best to try to create a better culture within my team, but there was still a company culture over me that was like, the company was owned and operated primarily by investment bankers and not by like creative people. Like it was a game studio, but it was a game studio that was founded by investment bankers that thought that games were a good way of like leveraging their wealth into a bigger payout.
Yeah.
And like, the kind of company culture that comes from that is not the kind of thing that I think creative people aspire to be a part of.
I couldn't agree more, man. And to your point, so I've worked in certain kinds of studios, and as a result, because this is all entertainment industry, you wind up having friends that work, Netflix and major movie studios, that kind of stuff, right? And the one thing that's in common, whether my friends are music or movies, TV, or gaming, the thing that's always exactly the same is navigating the politics of what you just discussed, right? There's money people at the top asking things of leadership that's not necessarily creative. And then you have non-creative leadership talking to creative leadership, and then you have creative leadership talking to the actual creatives. And how that chain gets communicated is the most important thing in a project, right? To how things turn out and how people feel on a daily basis. And there are some studios where it's great and it starts to get worse. And there are some studios where it's terrible and people leave and then it gets better. And that's why I talk about people's individual journey, because I think unless you're not just a good artist, but you like mature as a person, it's really, really difficult to navigate the rough waters of that transition, those transitions and those situations. And it does matter. I don't think it's impenetrable. I think at least in my experience, certain personality types can diffuse a lot of fear and insecurity in a situation to lessen the lows of those situations. The one thing you can't change is shareholders making terrible decisions. If that happens, then just do your best until you move on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I talk about it in general, though, it's not just in a studio environment. Like a lot of the places I've seen it has been in online communities and like at conventions, meeting other working artists in person, and seeing the way that they've grown a habit to kind of recoil from. They talk about how they when they start opening up and they're not when they're not talking to a fan or whatever, they open up a little bit and start discussing the ways in which they start to feel really uncomfortable being around artists that they perceive as being better than them, and like looking at art that they think is really good, and like they see some new thing that somebody posts, and instead of being able to celebrate that art of somebody who's one of their peers, that they become like disgusted. They like have to look away from seeing art that is the kind of thing that got them into the job in the first place, because of the ways in which their own identity has been kind of corrupted by this feeling of needing to always be better, and that, like, you know, when they're visibly, when they feel like they're not the best, they feel like a total piece of shit. And it's like affected their ability to form relationships. It's affected their ability to like enjoy art. And it's something I've never personally really struggled with. And I've always felt like I'm in contrast to that, because, I mean, I dumped out of the entertainment industry more or less like 10 years ago. And I've just been independent for the last 10 years. And so you know, when I'm meeting other indie artists, I don't have any kind of feelings of competition with them, because, you know, we all have different audiences, and like, we're not taking from each other by succeeding. And so I tend to feel a lot of camaraderie with people who are in the same space as me, who are doing well in their own way. And then it feels like a real cultural contrast when I go to some place like Lightbox Expo and I meet a bunch of people who are all working in like games and film, and that isn't as present. It, like, because I have exposure to this other community where the values are very different, like, the contrast really, really gets brought out. It highlights in like a really strong way. And
That's so interesting that you bring that up, because I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
No, go ahead. I was repeating myself.
So no, I think you make a great point, and this is something that we've actually discussed before in my industry. Which, for everybody who doesn't know, my industry is comics, right? So not primarily, I've done other stuff, but primarily comics. So the thing that separates comic book artists from other artists is you often get associated with a character, right? Now, whether it's your character or belongs to somebody else, it's still, you get associated with it because you're the one who visualized it. And when they go to the convention, if they're a fan of that book, they're specifically going to see you. They're not going to see a good artist, right? They're going to see the artist who drew this specific story that gave them an emotional response. And so our interactions with fans are not just individualized, but they're individualized based on on a specific storytelling experience. Not like, say, in gaming, I don't care how many AVORs you drew. You didn't render the specific character, right? You contributed to the idea. But when it's a comic, the physical picture that they looked at is something you actually drew.
Yeah.
So that there's a one-to-one connection there. So when they ask for a sketch, they're getting a live version of the exact experience that they got when they bought the book. And I think for us, it gives us a version of what you're talking about, where if somebody likes me for my comic, they're not gonna run from me because somebody else is better at a different thing. Right. That's why I always thought artistic awards are so dumb, because we're not trying to do the same thing.
Yeah.
It's not like, you know, everybody in the industry has to draw Spider-Man tonight, and then we say hand out awards. That'd be different, right?
Yeah.
We all do our different projects in our different ways, and if you work in character design, you're generally hired for your different approach that will contribute to the main thing. So how is me doing something that's highly individualized, even competition? This literally isn't sports. Right? There's not, because in sports, it all comes down to, did the ball go in the hole? That's what matters. It doesn't matter how you put it in the hole. Did it go in? How many times did it go in? Whoever put it in more times won. Whoever didn't lost. We don't have that element.
Well,
right?
There's something really interesting there you're bringing up, and I hadn't really. This connects to something else I think about sometimes. Is like, one of the things I really don't like about the video game and film industry for artists, like concept artists and illustrators, is that industry is really, really bad at stripping away ownership from the people who make stuff. They really hate crediting. They do the absolute minimum for crediting in a lot of cases. And people, like, in cases where a single artist has designed a popular character, they don't own the copyright, and they don't often even get acknowledged by the studio as being the creator of that thing. And so fans of that thing credit the studio rather than the artist for the creation of their thing that they're a fan of. And like, you know, you talking about, in comics you get associated with like the intellectual property. I'm like, damn, that sounds totally foreign to me, and sounds actually really nice. Like, that sounds like more healthy, where like people, because like in the one of the things that's really, we're talking about the competition between artists and how in like the entertainment industry, and like how they can get like this really toxic sense of competition with each other. When you are treated as a fungible component, that is like once the contract is over, there's no royalties and there's no credit for the things that you contributed. Like, I think that's when people start to get really toxic and competitive with each other, when they feel like their own value is being stolen away by the corporations that are employing them. And that, like,
I 100% agree.
And I think that a lot of the insecurities people have in art for a lot of topics comes back to the ways in which they are actually at the negotiating table with the corporations that pay them, and the ways in which they're being abused by those corporations, but they don't want to engage with that idea directly. And so that insecurity that's being fostered there is emerging in all sorts of different spaces. And so, like, I always thought that was a part of it, but you're starting to convince me that maybe it's a bigger thing.
I actually 100% think so. And if you look at leadership in a fractal sense, right? So a small friends group has a leader of personality, and the class has a leader of a teacher, and a studio has a leader of the head artist, and then this company has a leader of the CEO. The industry have the leaders of how the credit manifests, because credit is value, credit is identity.
Yeah.
Right? And so we see how the leadership in the broader entertainment industry, specifically in game, really, and in fact, let's narrow it down, in gaming and in film when it comes to artists, because I do think it's different in animation. It's better. Not as great as comics, but definitely better, right? And then you have comics, and you have individual artists like yourself, who's like, I have my Twitch, I have my YouTube, my Instagram, and that's where most of my fans know me,
Yeah.
right? Whereas a comic book artist is like, I have my book, that's how most of my fans know me.
Right.
And then you take the leap to animation, they go, well, I worked on this thing, and if you like that thing, I was a major part of it, less than the other two. And then you go to a video game where you go, well, I was one of the many faceless artists who did the design.
You could have been the sole creator of the villain, the famous villain of the video game. Like,
right.
You could have voiced him, you could have designed him, you could have done the 3D modeling, you could have voiced him, and at the end of the day, you are going to get zero credit for it. Like, no one is going to associate your name with it. Like, in some cases, like, what's even funnier is nowadays, I see that at conventions and online, the voice actors for characters are credited as being that character more so than the person who invented them.
Right.
Which isn't a knock against voice actors. Like, I like all creatives getting credit for whatever they did. It's just like, I find it peculiar that, like, artists in that space, a space I'm no longer a part of, get such short, get such a short shrift when it comes to, like, the ownership of their creative work. When there are plenty of industries where that's not the standard.
And I think that's what contributes to the toxicity you're talking about in the space that you're more familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, like we say, we always use that cliche, that axiom, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah. when we get to the very end of art and there's nothing left to say about it.
Right. So for someone who's developing and they want to be a concept artist, at the end of the day in their minds, it's going to be, am I more technically proficient than the five other people who were at the top of the candidates for this job? And if I am, then I'm going to get the job. And so everybody around me is my enemy.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're a comic book artist, at the end of the day, I'm dreaming of working on this book. Again, whether it's your personal book, Marvel, DC, doesn't matter. But I want to work on this kind of book. So I'm going to train in that way. This automatically has taken you out of competition with, at minimum, 90% of the people surrounding you.
Yeah.
Right? Because nobody wants to do a horror book that takes place in a fantasy world and has, no dragons in it. Like, they might have the first two and be like, oh no, but I love dragons. We're doing different stuff. I'm going to spend 30% of my time drawing dragons, and you're going to spend that time drawing whatever you're doing that replaces dragons. So you individualized your goals and how people will receive you. So already, unless you're being deliberately obtuse, I'm not literally in competition. So I might look at somebody's work and go, ooh, I want to be able to do that as well as you do it. But at the end of the day, the major quotation, bold underline, right? I'm not competing with you, right? So we can have micro communications as artists that could be deemed as competitive because there is a comparative element. Because we're using our eyes.
Getting away from comparison entirely is nearly impossible.
Right. But it's a healthy comparison.
Right.
Because, you're studying this, I learned this from you. I'm studying that, you learned it from me. We both got better as a result of proximity. But at the end of the day, I'm making this and you're making that. Good luck to both of us, right? Whereas I don't know if that exists in the concept art.
I wonder, because it's an interesting idea of because I know that I've done work for Magic the Gathering that if it were for a comic book IP, I would be getting residuals for it.
Yeah.
Creating original characters that's then being republished in a new context. The kind of thing that credit and residuals would be due in other industries, but in the illustration and in the concept art world, everything is work for hire, and there is nothing in the contracts about residuals, credit, anything.
Rob you blind. Oh no, I've been through the same thing. I worked on G.I. Joe in one of my earlier jobs, and I don't remember how many I created, but I created this one in particular that got kind of popular, and I played with G.I. Joes as a kid, so it was enough of a dream for me to work on it that I was just that was cool. But I recognize I got robbed, right?
Yeah.
No one knows.
Yeah, I'm not living my whole life thinking about the residual checks I should be getting. I'm trying to contextualize how this affects the industry and the people who work in it more holistically. Because as a result of me getting robbed blind, I've grown to become more protective of my intellectual property and value, my own IP a lot more. Which I think is the healthy response. Instead of constantly worrying about what's going on with somebody else, I've grown to just, be more focused on building and more focused on building and then maintaining ownership of those things that I construct for myself rather than worrying about, where I fit in some larger system. But
I think that's the healthiest thing, dude, is because you have your own space. What you did in other people's spaces matters so much less.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's the thing that I hope all artists recognize, especially in this day and age. Because literally, there's enough people, there's enough fans of art for everyone.
Absolutely.
Right? We do not have to steal from each other's plate. You can have as many fans as you want, and the next 100 artists can have as many fans as they want if you create your own space. If your dream is just to work for Company X, then when Company X robs you, which they inevitably will on some
they're going to try at least.
You know what I mean?
Maybe they will, maybe they won't, but they're going to give it a shot,
Right. And it's not even that all companies are evil. It's that the design is not fair.
Yeah.
It just isn't, right? It's not designed to give you value equitable to the value that you provided. So,
it's their obligation to the institution, to the shareholders, to try to get the best deal possible. But it's also we are also obligated to try to get the best deal possible for ourselves. But we're put in these situations where it's we're not. They don't frame it as being adversarial. They're like, hey, don't you want to join us, be a part of the family, work along all these beautiful people who are so good at what they do? It's yeah, but you're not arguing for you right now. You're arguing for the corporate shareholders. And I, as an individual, need to argue for me because I don't have shareholders. I just have a mortgage. And I've got a wife and I got kids and I got to argue for that side. And I always feel this pressure that the companies use their personnel as a human shield to try to divert attention away, where it's when I went and I published a blog post criticizing the copyright and residuals practices of Wizards of the Coast, people are like, how dare you insult the art directors? And I'm like, the art directors don't set those policies, the fucking company lawyers do. You guys, I know you guys love the art directors, I love them too, but that's not who's writing these policies, and that's not who I'm arguing against. but we're in this culture that is like not separating those two, because the faces that they allow us to see and the names they allow us to know are the good people who we're ultimately not in an adversarial relationship with, and it's all a fucking trick. And like, this is what shocks me about what's going on with the whole WGA strike right now and the SAG-AFTRA strike, is like, you know, they keep trying to frame it like the writers and the actors are being assholes here, but they're like, no, we're not mad at movies. We're arguing against a bunch of corporate goons. The corporate like, at the very least, they get to, people have heard of the CEOs of some of these studios. You know, you can call Bob Iger a huge piece of shit and people know who you're talking about. But like, you know, with a company like Wizards of the Coast, you know, when they're pulling this bullshit on their workers, no one even knows the name of the CEO. They know the company puts out community managers, they put out art directors, they put out their top contractors, and they don't put their like CEOs and board members in the public eye, so that as soon as criticism starts getting leveled, they recede back into the shadows and they like hide away from these valid critiques, because like, you know, you don't want to be insulting like the good people who do, you know, make the products. But it's like, I don't know. I feel like I'm descending back into a very, very old rant here at this point, so I'm going to switch gears a little bit. But like, yeah, I really wish that we could all agree that like arguing for the well-being of creative people is a good thing, and we should all participate in it, regardless of whether or not it's our industry, and that like we are in a competition against a bunch of corporate goons who don't love us and probably don't love anybody, and that it's perfectly fine to maintain an adversarial relationship with the management.
I couldn't agree more, man. And just to address that one thing that you brought up, when they like trot out, you know, game developers and art directors and staff and community managers, sometimes, in fact, very often, and fans suspect this, but there's still some that think it's conspiracy theory. Sometimes the change that was put in there was purely put in because a shareholder said, do this. Yeah. And now the people who didn't want to do it in the first place have to go out and defend it and pretend it was their idea. Yeah. Similar to the WGA strike, like if you look at the WGA's demands, it's not that big of a deal. It's not like they're saying pay us twice as much as you used to. Yeah. They're just saying keep writers' rooms and a few other things, right? Yeah. The fact that you're even allowing this strike to happen based on those demands is so insidious. And so to bring it back to the art, art student or person who's in their early development as a pro who has these insecurities, they don't have this perspective that we just discussed, right? They can only because they need any job. They want to get any job. They're so unemployed. They're so living with their parents that like the worry about whether or not Bob Iger is going to come for them in their sleep is like not on the top of the list. Thank you so much for the Prime sub, Flummox. I really appreciate it, man. And so when I'm telling that person to just, hey, relax and have fun for art and art's sake, I know that I'm not only working against immaturity and not in a negative way, but just they don't know yet, ignorance. I'm working directly against their survival instinct. and I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say, okay, you'll get past this. I know you'll get more experience. I know you'll learn more information. And I'm confident enough that if I open my mouth, I'm going to help you get more skill. Right. I can't speed up your maturity and change your survival instinct right here, but I can help you get rid of this feeling that you have that unless you draw eyes better, your life is over. Well, but the thing that one of the things I think about a lot when I'm teaching people about art is this very Zen idea of the learning to try without trying. Yeah. And like there's a certain amount of like, we all know, we can all agree, you need to learn how to be better at your craft in order to like accomplish a lot of professional goals. But to simply hold that as the goal up front is often unproductive. And it's like, this is a very, very old piece of wisdom. You see it in Buddhism and Taoism and like old wisdom where they're like,
you have to learn to stop pushing so hard if you want to make real progress. That there is a flow to these things that requires some level of relaxation. And the trick is learning to try without trying. And so there are so many forces in the world that advocate for people to push harder. You know, it's money, it's prestige, it's like the pressure to move out of your parents' house, right? And so I feel an obligation to be an advocate for the opposing force in the universe, where I know they need to try, but like I also know that if they can't relax a little bit and enjoy the process a little more, they are going to progress slower. And so, in light of knowing that there is a real balance that needs to be struck in order for something to move, I feel like my energy as a teacher is often better spent advocating for the counter position when it comes to this very delicate balance. Because there is no shortage of voices in one's own head or in the world at large that's going to tell you to knuckle down, beat yourself up, focus more. Like, that's the to me, like, that feels like it's the default in the world. And so, like, I know this very consciously, and so when I'm advocating for people to chill out and do some art with the homies, it is with the intent of ultimately trying to help people trick themselves into like learning and progressing and focusing better, like, because, like, you know, we understand that that's ultimately like the thing that we're trying to do, but there's a certain amount of like theater that I think that we need to like participate in order to really accomplish that goal. Because it's like, you know, like everybody who says, oh, I'm just going to stop everything I'm doing in life, I'm going to shut down all my like social life, and I'm going to just focus on doing studies for 12 hours a day, those people are screwed if they try to do that. Like, that's a bad plan. But yet, so it's just like, well, you could say, oh, well, don't do that, you should do something more balanced. Well, yeah, no shit. Like, everyone knows that like the middle road's the right one. But do we actually, like, the question I have in my head, and I really think that I might be onto something here, is like, is the path to the middle road to really push towards the middle, or is it to push all the way to the other side? Because, like, so, are we ever really going to run out of motivations to try to push ourselves too hard?
Victor,
so I think. Oh no, go ahead.
I was going to say, Viktor Frankl talks about this idea of paradoxical intent, in the kind of context of psychotherapy. But he talks about how it's like the more you try to, you know, achieve the thing is directly proportional to the amount of difficulty you're going to find achieving the thing. And he gave this example of a young boy who had like this really intense, pervasive form of Tourette's when he was, or a stutter, sorry, as a child. And there was not like a single moment where he was relieved from it, except for one moment where he hitched a ride in some streetcar, and the driver caught him, and in an attempt to drum up some sympathy on a poor stuttering child, he tried to stutter in front of this driver, and for the first time in his life, by having this intent of stuttering, even though he's always been trapped in this his entire life, he was unable to do it. And it's kind of like the idea of like trying to feel the edge of a sandcastle by punching it. It's like, and I think you're right, Peter. It is echoed a lot in like kind of Buddhist wisdom, like Wu way of the middle way of it's like the harder you try to scrunch your face into enlightenment, you know, the further you're going to get from it.
Yeah, this is not, I mean, this is not necessarily an insight of mine. I felt like I started to get that insight about myself. And then I started, you know, reading some philosophy, and I was like, oh, hey, no shit. Like, it turns out everyone learned this like 3,000, 6,000 years ago or whatever, you know? And so now, and they said it way better, and there's all this like vocabulary out there for it. And I'm like, oh, I can just cheat off of their homework. You know, I can just copy whatever Zhuangzi was writing down, and I'm like, I'm golden. You know, I don't even have to think that hard.
So I have a theory as it pertains directly to this issue that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I could be wrong, but hear me out. I think we teach art very poorly. And so the reason it's so difficult, specifically in art, is because of how we teach it. I'll be a little more detailed here.
Please.
So if we go to language, we say art, work.
Uh-huh.
But when you go to music, you play music, right? But if you understand art theory and music theory, you'll see these are almost identical. So why is it that the training process of art is based off of work and the training process of music is based off of play? Now, before we go back to art, I'm going to tell you exactly what musicians do when they train guitar properly. So when people train guitar improperly, what they do is they do a bunch of scales, right? Maybe they do some chord exercises, they put on a metronome, and they speed up, right? From slow to fast. And eventually they get faster and their technique gets very good. Then after months or maybe even years, maybe sometimes decades of working on this technique, they go, I'm as fast as I ever could possibly be, and I stink at guitar. Like, I don't literally stink, right? Like, if people see me play, they go, oh, you're good. But when I go to actually write a song, I have nothing. Here's what they were missing. It was a connection to the abstract. Now, guitar players, or musicians in general, they call this ear training. And it's a way for you to connect to the abstract. And what you do exactly is you play a droning note, and then you play the other notes in the scale, and you see how it feels when the two notes push against each other. And understanding that emotional value, then you can go back to all the songs that you like, and now you go, oh, I really like that part because they went from a major fourth to a minor fourth, and that's a plagal cadence, and that's why I like Radiohead, right? Because they connected the abstract to the literal. In art, we train 99% literal. We train 99% technique. Everything is how to draw a face, how to do structure, even color theory, which theoretically is extremely abstract and nearly identical to music. We teach it with here are the rules of color theory.
Yeah, fuck you, Moncel. Fuck you and your fucking system. I don't care.
So when really what we should be teaching is here are how these things interact and see how you feel about it. Now, specific to art, what I teach people is take a blank canvas, whatever shape. For now, let's just say it's movie screen storyboard shape, right? Draw a line through that. When you drew that line, you subdivided the space into two parts. You split the space. You took the space of visual silence and you split it. So now that you know you're doing that, look at the rhythm of the split. Even if it's a straight line, take that straight line, move it up, move it down. See how you feel about that space. Now, go to a painting. Draw a line through that painting and see where that space split was. When you did it a line on a blank board, it didn't mean anything to you because you haven't practiced this yet. But now that you associate it with something that does have meaning to you, now you understand emotionally and intellectually, ooh, that's the composition, the basic composition I get just purely from the subdivision. And then you take that subdivision idea and you extend it into shapes of the line. So move the line in a way. You extend it into darks and lights and so on and so forth. And eventually you have an abstract understanding of art. And this is important for the fun thing you're talking about, because abstraction is pure fun, because you can't get abstraction wrong. You're just deciding how you feel about it. You're just going, well, what if this is over here? What if this is over there? When people are practicing ear training in music, they're not literally composing music. They're just saying, what does a minor second interval actually feel like? Okay, what does a ninth feel like? They're just asking that question. And it's the same, and it's something that artists almost never do. And so they have this atrophied, abstract muscle, yet it's so important that they use it and so important that they be good at it. So that, for me, I think is the solution with artists, is that artists play more. But you have to learn how to play. It's not literally just doing anything you want, because the survival mechanism's not satisfied by it.
I agree that, like, the lack of play is the big problem in a lot of cases. Because I've met plenty of artists who went through atelier training, and you ask them to, like, draw an idea, and they don't know how to do it.
Draw a kangaroo.
Yeah. And it's like, like the play part was like where I basically made where I spent all of my time for all the years where I was like in college and stuff. And so I got recognized for art way before I got any of the technical stuff, because like people really do value the creative voice a lot more than they value like the technique, even in a lot of professional spaces. That's what ultimately gets you noticed.
Tim Gula has a video on Procore where he talks about the automatic drawing technique is something that he observed people like Jack Kirby do, whereas they like mixed in with their studio work, they would do sort of what you were saying, Books, but not quite, where they would have a blank canvas and they would because as we learn the hard skills of art, things get encoded into our instincts and our subconscious, our intuition. And the automatic drawing exercise is one where you're working purely abstractly, but not even with the objective of understanding, but purely as a way of play. It's like a jazz musician, after they nail down their scales and really hard encode that into their mind, they're able to riff once they have that kind of inbuilt. But this is something I've observed in friends who have no drawing experience whatsoever. They're still able to access this zone of play. Like I had a friend send me some pictures where it's like he's just literally making lines and he's letting his mind relax and slip into this sort of meditative automatic state where it's all this like kind of lower level mental architecture that's doing the work automatically, and it's enjoyable to him, and I don't think that needs to escape an artist at any point in their journey. I think you talk a lot about like reframing the way we teach art, and I think you're right in that. I feel like I liked how you made the distinction between play and music and work and art, because I think it functions like the arts. The more you do the arts in any format, the more you realize how much they dovetail together and how similar they are.
Yes.
The question of how do you actually build instruction on that is really interesting. Like I'm super fascinated by the fact that you have a technique for it, because I've heard very few people talk about a technique to develop this sense. Because like for me, it was just like, oh, I just want to draw my OCs and post the DeviantArt, and I really don't give a fuck. And like that was enough to like put me on the right path when it came to that skill set. But that's not a real instruction you can give to somebody who's an aspiring artist. Like, oh, just don't give a fuck and just post on the internet and paint whatever you feel like is advice that I give out, but like I understand at the same time it's lacking the kind of it's not as actionable as I would like, and it's not a particularly actionable piece of advice that you could get from an expert.
When I make the YouTube video, I'll tag you in it, and we can discuss it and let me know what you think.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to see it, like, because I'd love to, see it tried out on some people, because, like, man, this is one of those things that, like, I know is super valuable. I agree with you wholeheartedly on it, but, like, I've never seen it demonstrated in a teaching technique that, like, because it's just, it's not the quality that a lot of the community that I'm a part of, like, really cares about. Like, it's hard to even say that, because it's like everybody likes the result of somebody who's going to create playfully and authentically, but there's very little artistic instruction on like how to achieve that.
Yeah, I push back a little bit. Not that you're wrong. It's not what they're aware that they care about. In actuality, it's a large percentage of what they care about.
Right.
Through an exercise that I will do on the video, I will show that I think it's like 90% of what people care about. But they so focus on the 10% of technicality that it blinds them to everything else. Like kind of like humanity, like all we focus on is our differences, and we forget that humans are 99.99999 the same, right? Especially compared to every other creature, the percentage of us that's different is extremely small. But we focus on those differences. When we race, we go, this person was 0.001 seconds faster than the other person. They're the fastest person in the world. It's ridiculous. And we extrapolate this to so many things in life. And we allow the one thing we're focusing on to contextualize the whole. But if we leave that for a second, the skill that we're talking about, it's an abstract skill that translates to an artistic skill. It's not an artistic skill. Because just like in music, the skill is listening, shutting up, and observing space. That's what you're doing. You're observing space, you're listening to space, and then you're reacting to the division of space.
If I
So
went to a
whether it's-
class and the teacher sat at the front and said, "Now I want you all to observe space," and I would ask for my $50 back.
You would if I literally said it like that, which I wouldn't do, because I'm definitely aware that when you're teaching art and music, a vulgar display of power is necessary.
Uh-huh.
So what I do is I take a finished drawing from somebody else, like a famous artist, right? And then I deconstruct it into space, into further abstract space. And then when we go back up, we can see the value. And there's actually, and I'm kind of giving you guys, the goods here, but spoiler alert.
You're giving it away.
So there's a technique where a drawing is completely abstract, but if you shrink it down far enough, it looks exactly as if it's finished at that same size. When people see that, they go, "Oh my God, I thought that was actually the same drawing," or similar. "I didn't realize it was just seemingly random markings." And now they've visually seen the power of abstraction. Because if abstraction wasn't real, if it wasn't important to observe space and its subsequent subdivisions, then it would be impossible to replicate a technical drawing with nonsense, which you can absolutely do.
That reminds me of one of my very favorite optical illusions. I use this when I'm trying to teach people about painting all the time. Do you know Mr. Angry and Miss Calm?
No.
Let me pull it up. I'm going to pull it up on the stream real quick. This is a cool image. Let me just bring it up. It's a full size here.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to zoom in all the way, make it big. And you can actually see that it's beyond it just being effective. It's possible to make art that's exactly wrong in this way. Because if you look at the main screen, you'll see that the left face is angry and the right face is calm, right? But if you look at the navigator, it's the opposite.
Damn.
That's awesome.
That it's actually in this case it's a matter of high pass versus low pass detail. That the soft broad strokes of the images are transposed on each other, along with the high pass detail, and that it's actually the ways in which our brains digest imagery are fairly complicated. And this is what I discovered. I always thought I was bad at drawing women's faces. I couldn't ever draw women right. They always looked masculine. And I realized I kept going into finer and finer details, just trying to make sure all the eyelashes were perfectly rendered and everything. And it wasn't until I started actually paying attention to what everything looked like from far away,
Right.
and looking at the broad strokes and looking at the overall, the biggest, most important, highest level hierarchy shapes, that I was able to actually began to make big progress on a lot of my painting. And, people don't realize the degree to which that can be true until they see it fully. That it's fully in. You can make the image fully inverted by getting that part wrong. You can have a painting that, even if you have every detail in place and you spent 1,000 hours making sure every little crease and crack are exactly in the right spot, you can zoom out and still end up with a total piece of shit.
Exactly, right? You can, and so this is a great example of how you can break people's attachment to the literal. Because it's not about not using the literal, it's about putting it in its proper place in art. Art is now, and I've been using the word abstract and subdivisions, but the end result of this is what we call design and composition, right? But the way we teach design and composition is in a rules kind of way. Even when people don't say the word rules, they're teaching in the methodology of rules, right? When really that's not how it's done, because people will never do new compositions if they're following your rules of compositions. And to put it in a musical context, if I told you the rules of music theory, which there are no rules of music theory, it's a discussion of how music interacts, right? But if I told you the rules of music theory according to Western classical music, you'd never create jazz. And if I told you the rules of music theory according to, Scandinavian folk, you'd never create blues. And so on. And if I told you the rules according to blues, you'd never create hip hop. So the creativity has to come from an understanding that is abstract, not an understanding that is fundamental. You'll get to the fundamental, but get there through the vehicle of the abstract. And then you can always have fun with art.
You can always have fun with art. It's true.
No, that's kind of what happened. I kind of got lost in the conversation when everyone was saying that's crazy. I'm like, what happened? I was lost in my piece. So I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Being able to like relax the brain and like really just get into a piece of art and like lose the sense of expectation for it.
Yeah.
It's always such a pleasure, but it also produces such incredible results. And
yes,
the process of trying to like get to there is one that feels like it's permanently changing, because like you feel like you need to come up with new creative tricks on how to like trick yourself into getting into that mind state over and over again, or at least maybe I do.
Well,
And,
so to your point, right? So most people, now you're lucky enough to have found this intuitively, but most people, I shouldn't say most people, but a large group of artists have never had that intuitive element give them a result. So they don't trust it. But if they can trust it and they can practice it, they're practicing the skill of intuition now, right? They're allowing themselves to react rather than to plan in every instant. And so now the work can become more individualized and organic and spontaneous, because they're literally reacting as they work, because they've worked on the muscles of reacting.
yeah. Which, yeah, teaching that is, we were talking about it the previous day about how, there's this sort of question that got raised in the conversation about, is it possible to teach somebody to be curious? Because one of the essential qualities of like getting better is just like, you have these questions that hang in your mind, like, how do you do this thing? Or what is that shaped like? And then you look around and you see it you just like spontaneously discover it, like in an image or in the world. And like, so you're like, oh, well, you can just learn everything from reference or from like being observant, but it presumes that you are a curious person. And it's like, if somebody doesn't possess that level of curiosity, there is a question about whether or not it can be instilled in them. Like, this is like the question of like, can you teach somebody to be improvisational? Can you teach them to be curious? I feel like there's still kind of like nebulous questions, because like it's not the same question of can you teach anatomy.
So I think what happens there, going back to the humans are 99 point a whole bunch of nines the same, right? Everyone has that in them. But what happens is with the, scrapes and scratches of life, some people don't allow themselves to feel that way, because with curiosity comes risk. And when you let go of the shield of technicality, you open yourself up to the arrows of criticism. And it's less about whether or not people have that inside of them, so much as it is what do they have on the outside of them that's preventing it from coming out. So if they let go of the shield of technicality and let go and they embrace the vulnerability of curiosity, then they'll be plenty curious. They just need to be told that it's okay.
This conversation, no matter who it's with, always comes back to a point that sounds like it's dangerously close to going to therapy. That it's just like it's just like you have to realize the reason why you're bad at drawing faces is because you've never allowed your inner child to feel vulnerable. And you're like, oh, okay, yeah, man, I get it. You're right. You know, and like
So
this, like I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying I find it. I find myself entering these kind of conversations all the time, and it's amusing to me how much it overlaps with this sort of broader sense of self and identity and like mental well-being and like, you know, self-actualization, that like these things they intersect with art all the time. It makes it sometimes difficult to give instruction because you can't give this kind of advice in like a fully generalized way. Like you can't just tell everybody, oh, what you need to do is embrace your inner child, then you'll be great.
I think
instruction is therapy confirmed.
Yeah.
It requires a certain level of development to get to this lesson,
Yeah.
right? Which is why every tutorial that's like how to draw a face is going to do better than a tutorial that's really going to be useful. So the thing is, when I say observe the space, observation is listening, right? With your eyes. And you're not listening for something from the outside. You're observing what's on the outside and you're listening for yourself. And that listening for yourself, not to yourself, for yourself. You observe a space and you allow yourself to enter that space with intention, right? Because when we put I'm going to stick with drawing for a moment, but when we put a pencil on a piece of paper, before we move it, we've started the location of intention. And then when we create a line, we move that intention in a specific direction. And then when we change the shape of that line, we alter the course of that direction in a specific way. Sharp, round,
you
light,
can always
soft.
you can always spot somebody who knows a lot about art when they say the word intention, like it's like the name of God, you know.
right, because
It's like with this precise emphasis every single time. And because I was thinking about this morning, this like idea of intention, like that if an action is made with true intention, it hits on a different part of the brain entirely. Like if I truly want to make a change in my life, and that involves like waking up at a certain time of day, even like I will wake up 5 minutes before my alarm goes off every single time. And it's like, there is a difference between telling myself that I want something and like truly intending to do it. And that like, there's this deep power of intention that I've had enough experience with to know like how big it is, and to like want to try to tell people about it. Like, hey, there is this powerful force that we all possess called intention, and it's maybe the most important force in art. But then it's like almost immediately, it's not an art lesson, it's a religious sermon, and it's like, damn, okay, well, there's got to be like a way of getting to this that isn't crossing from, you know, art lesson into religious sermon, but still like respects these ideas. That's a challenge. I find it to be an interesting challenge.
For me, that's where the specificity comes in,
Yeah.
right? Because while the idea is very abstract, the exercise is extraordinarily localized, right?
Yeah.
So dialing this back down to a line. And now, once I do a whole bunch of artistic things to get people's trust, right? I can draw, I'm not terrible, right? You have a reason to listen. So if you trust me, put aside, understand that we'll get to you're great at this in a way that makes you feel good as a person, right? Okay, we'll get there. But for now, just draw that line and see how you feel about it. And if you don't feel anything, that's okay. Because the next exercise is don't draw anything else. You drew that line, the page is subdivided into spaces. And it doesn't have to be a straight line, it can be a wobbly line, whatever. Now what I want you to do is put yourself into it. And the way you're going to do that is I want you to imagine what could be on one side of the space versus the other. Just come up with things. Just look at that now subdivided space and imagine things. Just two things. One thing inside the space and the other part of the space is empty. What's in the space in the subdivided area, right? Okay, take that subdivided area and color it dark. Not black, dark. Now you have a dark space and a light space. So we've gone from pure subdivision to the dichotomy of light and dark. And so now we can start to progress. We get a progression of listening, intending, imagining, acting, and then listening again. And that's all you need. You don't need more than that. So like all of the reasons and blah, blah, blah. I mean, I think the whole point of art is self-discovery and then sharing that with other people who would be helped by that discovered self, right? Because they share that emotion, experience, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
That comes anyway. I don't have to do that. The universe did that, right? I'm just talking about how it works. That's the beautiful thing. You teach music theory, and this is just how sound works. I'm not responsible for this. I just work here, right? So, same thing. It's like I don't have to, stick the landing and make this, show you the greater meaning of it. Just by doing this, you will become more intuitive, because you are activating your imagination and you're putting a capital I on those intentions. Now that you've done that, okay, pay me $1,000, follow my Patreon, like, share, subscribe, and have fun. You know what I'm saying? Like, congratulations. Now you have freed yourself from what the outside world tells you your art has to be. And that's the goal.
Hey Adam, that like intuitive drawing thing you brought up?
Yeah.
I did that and it worked.
Yeah, like there's a period of like a month where I was just so burnt out from grinding the technical mindset that I spent a whole month just doing that, and it was amazing. And I think it really developed. It really honed my, because you can't hone your intuition through any other way but practicing your intuition. Yeah. And I feel like doing that stretch where I removed all expectation, all pressure, all technical intention. I think that it's still with me today.
Yeah, all the like filigree and stuff, my like armor designs and stuff have on them. Like I got good at doing that just by like doodling tons and tons of filigree in my sketchbooks without like looking at anything. Yeah. That's great,
man. That's great to hear. And I think it's so cool too, because you get to see, because everybody has their habits and what they're drawn towards, and everybody's automatic sketchbook is going to look a bit different. And I think that is sort of one of the ways to look at sort of the pure expression of the artist and their personality is seeing what sort of shapes and movements they default to.
Oh, also, like, when I was starting out, I did tons and tons of gesture drawing, and, like, I didn't get it. Like, I wasn't getting any better at it. I didn't understand the point of it. And, like, no matter how much I did it, the gesture of my stuff would always suck. Mm-hmm. And then, like, I did tons and tons of, like, creative stuff, like making my own art or whatever. Mm-hmm. And, like, I went back and tried gesture drawing recently because of, like, Omen's classes. I'm, like, way better at it now than I used to be. And it's just... I still don't understand it. Like I can't explain in words what makes like a good gesture, but like I kind of know how to like identify like a good flowy line or whatever. Like now, and I think it's just training intuition is like 90% of it.
Hey,
awesome.
Hey, Books.
Yeah.
By the way, when you were describing all the things about intention and like the more like metaphysical part of art, I think you did a far better job explaining it than my college teachers did.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, he just gave me a sermon right now.
You are super big brain, Books. How do we get more?
Yeah, feel free to self-promote. I'm never shy about letting people self-promote.
Okay, well, I just typed in Twitch. You guys can follow me on Twitch here, and my YouTube is, I believe, the same name, and my Instagram and Twitter are roughly the same. Well, so Nelson Blake II is my name, Nelson Blake II. If you write that into Google, you'll find my Twitter and Instagram and all of that stuff. But yeah, here on Twitch, I am going to be streaming a lot more. I've been streaming. I just started streaming, so this past week I streamed, I think, 4 or 5 times. So I'm definitely getting back. And that's how I found your channel, because once I started streaming, they started recommending my channels.
Oh, okay, cool. So yeah, I actually just started streaming like a week ago too.
Nice. Oh, that's dope, dude. That's wow. How serendipitous. So, or fortuitous. So yeah. So follow me there. I'm going to be making a lot more YouTube channels. Not channels. YouTube videos. My next video is just going to be a basic one on how to study anatomy, because I think people study anatomy improperly. And as a comic book artist, that's the main thing. Learn your anatomy, blah blah blah. So there'll be an anatomy video. I will make the abstract video soon as well. And if you guys have any topics you want me to cover, I'll be happy to make a video about that.
We're looking to sort of surface and republish any educational content like for the brand. Like Huckleberry Art Academy is like an art project that I started recently that is like going to grow into a paid online thing, but is like we're really just growing it by providing a lot of free resources for education and for conversation around like art education. And so, feel free to like reach out to me about like reposting stuff, and I want to aggregate some of the stuff on this topic into like one feed for people who want to like get more of it, because there's a lot of free content out there on the internet, but it's also like there's so many different philosophies and so many different approaches. It can be overwhelming. So I want to try to create create a more focused community that's like interested in this aspect of things.
Yeah, YouTube is a great place to learn guitar if you already kind of know what you're doing. If you don't, it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with art. If you're kind of already there and you know what you're looking for, it's great. If you still need to cross that bridge, it's I don't know. This guy said do it this way. That guy said do it that way. They're both pretty good. What do I do? So yeah, I think that's awesome. And honestly, that's why I'm doing this content, because I have work. I'm literally working 3 jobs right now. But I realized that I needed to teach people the stuff that I found. To give you guys a very short story, something had happened with a mutual friend, and I called a buddy who knew that mutual friend. His name is Brian Stelfreeze, who's very popular.
I met Brian.
Excellent comic book. Okay,
Brian, back when I lived in Atlanta, he was doing a life drawing thing with back when Studio Ronin existed. I showed up to that a bunch of times.
Awesome. So I'm close with Brian, right? So I called Brian to help out with this situation, and we wound up talking art. And this stuff that I started discussing with you guys had been in my head for a while, and so I started talking to him about it. And the sound of his voice being like, dude, I can't believe somebody else is thinking about this stuff. I was like, okay, now I need to share this with people. Once I got the seal of approval from Brian, I was like, okay, this is definitely something worth sharing. So that's my motivation with all this stuff, is just to help out.
You got a question in chat. Brian who? Brian Stelfreeze. Really good comic artist and really good life drawer and like all around very chill dude. I mean, I haven't seen him.
We call him Yoda.
I haven't seen him in 15 years, so maybe he turned into a huge asshole between now and then, but it didn't seem like it.
No, Brian's great. Yeah, Brian actually. So 15 years ago, I guess that was before he did Black Panther. So Brian was already popular in the comic book industry, but he was what you would call an artist.
Right.
But he did Black Panther with Ta-Nehisi Coates, and that blew him up. And so now he's like super duper mainstream.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So Brian, so it's funny because he was already like famous within the industry, but now he's like one of the big names. So he's doing great, but it hasn't changed him at all. He's,
that's good.
He's awesome.
Yeah, I remember going out to Taco Mac with him a bunch of times.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you spent time with Brian, I'm sure there was a lot of talking about art.
Yeah, but like you're right. Like these kinds of more esoteric topics, I tend to drift towards them a lot too. I think about them a lot, but it's also like it's one of those things where it's like I feel like in the I was talking about different bubbles, and like in the fine art bubble, this is all they talk about. Okay. But they don't ever focus on technique at all. So it's like. It's just that they do a lot of like collage, like it's like you have to be working intuitive, and it's just like it's just abstracts and collage and shit like that. And and most people who go through like a fine art program, if they're like a college student, they just go into fine arts. They're like, this is really confusing. It doesn't seem to apply to anything. It doesn't seem to apply to any kind of real professional skills. What the fuck? Like, how do I actually get better? If I'm only being given like these incredibly abstract expressions of what art is or could be. And then you go to like the entertainment design track, and it's like it's literally just like it's being treated like you're being taught how to do like HVAC repair,
Right.
And like I've always believed that it's a compromise. That both of those mindsets, like they need to be respected. They need to be practiced. You should be curious about both sides of it in order to like achieve things that are, both like creative but technically very strong, so that like, it's not only a good song, but it's a good song played well. And it's like finding that balance is really tough, because you kind of have to, at times it feels like you got to kind of take the piss out of the opposite side, right? Like they are in tension with each other to a degree. So I find myself like wanting to tell people about technical tips and tricks about learning anatomy and stuff like that. But then at the same time telling them none of it matters, and that if you really want to capture people's attention, there's something lyrical and poetic and abstract that you need to be able to capture. And anybody who's only ever learned about that, it's like, let's get in there and let's do some technical studies. Like there's a balance of these opposing, and I don't even think it's just two sides of a spectrum. I think it's part of a more complicated web of perception that it's difficult to get a foothold on any one part, because there's no singular direction that you can advance in. It's like art is a lot of different things. It's a lot of separate skills, and it's a lot of different philosophies that intersect. And so when any individual is trying to get better at it, it's like, it's really good to learn about all these different things, but then to know where we ourselves need to advance in order to start achieving our goals. It's like, it gets really murky. It's because it then you start having to ask big questions about that are like have to do with self-assessment. What do you need? That's a big question. Most people don't know the answer. Like, you hope to have good teachers or good community to be able to help you out with that, but not everyone is like always given that opportunity. So it's like everything becomes conditional really, really fast. And it's frustrating. It's frustrating to not be able to have like really hard and fast answers or really like repeatable processes for everything, especially when it comes to education. But the fact that it's so impossible to come to like ultimate truths is sort of why the whole thing remains a pleasure to like, and a challenge, like, over the length of your entire life. So it's sort of insurmountability is like in one way really frustrating, but it's the kind of frustration that keeps me coming back. It's like the challenge of like a really good video game of like, this is like, it's like all of these things that we're talking about, they're not masterable. They're like, you can always make advancements, but you can never fully like become enlightened. Enlightenment is like, it's not a realistic goal. And that's what's so great about it. I think that's like what my conclusion to this point in my life. I'm just about to turn 40. So I'm sure there's more wisdom to be earned down the line, but like I kind of love this idea that like actually none of this stuff has a real answer, and that we're not actually aiming for it, but we're like the lack of solid answers and like the constant raising of new questions is like kind of what we're here for, and why like a pursuit like art can be a lifelong pursuit, and why it's so damn satisfying to be a part of. I mean, it's like I didn't get into this because I thought becoming an artist was a good financial decision. I was a moody teenager who wanted an outlet, and I got really lucky that like I was in the right position to have the right opportunities to like both learn and have the safety to be able to progress professionally, in a being allowed to make a lot of mistakes and then still not go bankrupt. So it's like I've managed to stumble my way into a place where it's a career, but I honestly I think that like the goal, it's weird. Like I want everybody who doesn't have a job, who wants a job, to like help them progress towards that goal. But I personally want to shoot past that to the point where it's like, all right, and now let's retire so we can get back to business, which is like making art for not money, and like using art as like a vehicle of pure self-expression and not worrying about whether or not companies like Marvel or DC, Wizards of the Coast, or any of these assholes like cares that we exist. It would be so liberating to be able to create art outside of the realm of money, but also, mortgage is like a serious is like a real thing. Like, and so I treat that problem really seriously too, and it's something that we talk about all the time around here too. Is the business of art, because we can't just completely separate ourselves from it.
Well, I think going back to that word separation, right? They're saying like that money's not the root of all evil, separation is. And so because the universe is one thing, and it's us who separate it, it's us who subdivide it, and it's okay. But it's also, we take it too far. And we say, well, music is different than art. It's totally different. There's nothing in common. That's not true. We can separate music and art, but that separation is based on how we work as a mechanism, right? Our eyes and our ears. And we can recognize upon study that there are elemental differences, but the behaviors are quite similar, right? The functions are quite similar. So going with that same thing, you can separate things in a healthy way, but not take it too far. So art is a journey of self-discovery.
Mm-hmm.
You can separate that from, I also want to make a living doing art. But you don't have to separate it in an unhealthy way, because you can say, okay, I'm taking this job. This job will be 40% self-discovery, 60% technical exercise, 100% paying my bills. Okay, cool. That's a win, right? If the job is only 20% self-discovery and 80% technical exercise, maybe find another one, right? If it's 70% self-discovery, but it doesn't pay that well, I'll do it anyway. And I think that on its own can help make the career of art less of a job and more of a discipline, more of a craft. But aside from that, and I feel this very strongly about every artist, always be working on the personal relationship between you and your specific audience, not your audience through the filter of people who hire you, your audience. And it's never been easier in history to do that with a larger group of people.
Man, it's never been a better time to be an artist. I gotta say, it's
absolutely
being a creator. There's never been a better time. There's never been better tools to be a creator in public spaces. It's like the internet, for all its many ills, is like a gift to people who want to make stuff every day for a living.
Yeah. They so like when athletes sprain an ankle, right? Usually what happens is when they come back too soon before the ankle is healed, they hurt the other leg because they spent so much time compensating. When we talk about learning the abstract, it's not to get away from the technical stuff. It's to heal that part of you so that you don't sprain the technical ankle. Right? Like, you've been working so hard on the technical.
I'm not entirely sure what you mean. I know plenty of people who have literally sprained parts of their body trying to work too hard because they're in the pursuit of technical excellence. I think you're speaking metaphorically, though.
Yeah, because you work so hard on technical skill that you get too stiff, too formulaic. Right? There's no exploration. Oh, sure. There's no experimentation.
Or you get discovery. An RSI, one of the two. Like a really bad one.
Right. So and not to change subjects, but I think so many people get afraid of AI art because they're drawing like robots.
Oh my god. Yeah, I have so many AI takes, and I'm just like, now I find myself having streamed for a week. I'm like, I can't have every single point about art come back to AI. I won't do it. I won't do it to the audience. I won't do it to them.
But what we're talking about is an emphasis on your humanity.
Yeah.
Discovering your humanity and sharing your humanity through the exploration of art. And I do think the technical stuff helps if you let it. If you don't narrow it down to good, bad, me better, like get out of that survival caveman element and just experience directly what you're working on. So like one of the things I'll talk about in the anatomy video is don't think of anatomy in terms of good and bad, and stop thinking of it in terms of anatomy. Study the skull. Okay, we're gonna just narrow it down to we're working on the skull. And so all of your wins and losses will be based off of how much of the information of the skull you're learning. And that's finite. Eventually you will have a good fundamental understanding of the skull. For the use of functional anatomy. And that's the whole thing. You're not learning the skull to become a medical artist who can draw a perfect skull at the drop of a hat. You're learning the skull to get a functional understanding of it so your faces don't fall apart. That's what we're doing. And when you specify it like that, now you'll say, oh, the reason I've been getting this so wrong is because I always do things like this. Not just me as an artist, but me as a person. And now I can fix that. I can change the way I see the world. Because most art improvement is just changing how you see things, not changing how you make things, right?
Right.
So if you allow yourself to change your perspective, the personal growth can also come from the technical side. Just don't attach your ego to the technical side, and it can help you. If you attach your ego to it, it's gonna be a struggle. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because the ego is a very hungry and demanding beast, and it never has enough. You'll never be good enough.
Yeah.
Ever. Trust me. Artists have been great that, like you said, some of the greatest artists who've ever lived have been the most insecure because their ego is attached to it. You have to love yourself as a person, whether you suck or not as an artist, and allow yourself to be a person, regardless of where you are on an art journey.
Yep. We got to wrap it up, though. I've got to get to other parts of my day. I'm going to be closing my stream. I was trying to do 2-hour streams. I don't think I've done a 2-hour stream yet because I've always gone like 3.5 hours, I feel like. But I'm done with my studies. It's been a great conversation. I'm going to get back to work. Thank you so much for stopping by, dude. It's great to meet you.
Dude, this was super dope. He's funny. I dropped him before, but I feel like this is the first time we really met. This was a lot of fun. It was enjoyable.
Great. You know, I'm following you on Twitch, so maybe you like we're streaming at the same time. I'll raid you next time, but we got to line up a raid, and I actually know what raids do now, so I'm gonna stick around and actually say hi to whoever I'm raiding. Okay, so I'm gonna try to do this from the commands here. Mako made. Raid has been created. All right. Yeah, we're going to raid Mako Made. Thanks, everyone, for stopping by. I'll be back again tomorrow, 12 noon, or noon Eastern. And is it Thursday or is it Friday? Is tomorrow tomorrow's community day. So we're going to be looking at a lot of community stuff. I'll be giving some art feedback to people and looking at the shit that's on the Discord. If you've got cool stuff you want to share on the Discord, now's a good time to do it so we can take a look at it tomorrow. And I'll see you then. Raiding now.
That was interesting.
Yeah.
Great conversation. Loved it.
Thank you. Yeah, it was fun. I didn't mean to take it over. I was trying to let other people talk at the beginning.
Oh no, it was great. It was like a podcast. Really, I really enjoyed it.
Awesome.
All right, now let's
I
see.
really like the point you said about not focusing on, not attaching your ego to your art. I feel like people really want to make it look good, even when they're doing studies, so they get burnt out while doing studies because they're focusing on their one thing. That's
exactly.
So common. So common. People don't talk about that. It's crazy, but man, such an easy fix.
Yo, bro, dude, I added a little bit of abstract. I had a mistake that I made intentional throughout the piece, and I was like, oh, I like this. So I was like, all right, we're gonna go with this. I like the way this is going.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. I'm glad people got something out of it.